bad singer. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Ways and Means Committee. Hope everyone is safely ensconced where they don't have to deal with the snow. Thursday, February 18th, we have 15 bills before us today. We will start with 2 racing and gaming bills. Then we will have 4 economic development bills, ending our day with 9 tax bills. So an exciting mix of legislation today. Thank you everyone for being here to testify on different bills. We're starting with Delegate Rosenberg's bill, House Bill 988. This one is jointly filed with appropriations, and we have Delegate Grice here, still waiting, it seems, for Delegate Forbes and Delegate Bridges as well. But we will start. Oh, I'm sorry, Delegate Bridges. There you are, right below me on my screen. Delegate Rosenberg, please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm joined today by my colleagues from the 41st District, Delegate Attar and Delegate Bridges, in introducing House Bill 988. What this bill would do would guarantee the continued consultation of all the neighborhoods surrounding Pimlico Racetrack with regard to the important decisions that are being made regarding the redevelopment of the track. As this committee well knows, because you gave the favorable report to the legislation last year, this will be far more than a racing venue. This will be a major redevelopment opportunity for Northwest Baltimore and the Baltimore metropolitan area. What this bill does is provide that there is existing language in the bill, in the law, that provides for an MOU regarding certain phases of the redevelopment. An MOU between the Maryland Jockey Club, the Baltimore Development Corporation, and LifeBridge Health, which is Sinai Hospital in Levendale. And it also provides the existing law for consultation with the Pimlico Community Development Authority, which has responsibility for the slots money, the one that comes to the Pimlico neighborhoods, as well as to communities within the boundaries of the Park Heights Master Plan. This bill would add to that list of consulted communities the 5 neighborhoods to the north of the track, which are part of the 1 mile radius neighborhoods that receive assistance from slots money. These neighborhoods, north and south of the track, as well as the neighborhoods in the Park Heights Master Plan that are not immediately adjacent to the track, have been around the table before we were Zooming about the racetrack to discuss the community's role and to ensure that there is community input in this redevelopment. They've reached agreement on a community compact, but this is another aspect of the redevelopment current law that this bill would amend so that all of the affected neighborhoods are consulted. And I would urge on behalf of myself and my colleagues, urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Rosenberg. We'll start with a question from Delegate Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Delegate Rosenberg, for this. I had a chance to visit this community last year, and I just have a question as to, by adding or modifying the MOU, does it in any way change the whole focus of the plans for the redevelopment of the neighborhoods?
No, it does not. This does not modify the MOU. It simply adds to the list of neighborhoods that are to be consulted
Okay.
regard to the MOU, these additional neighborhoods. It doesn't affect the MOU at all, the substance of the MOU at all.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. I remember it was a very cold day when you came to visit us, but we appreciated your visit.
That's right. Right. And just a quick question, yes or no. Are you making progress in terms of the library that was requested by the neighborhood?
The mayor is in the midst of initiating a review of what are the possible funding sources for a library. This is an issue that was the site plan or determining a site and the need for a library. Slots money was used for the initial planning, and now it's a question of where should it go? And currently the plans are for it to be, say, within a mile of the racetrack on Park Heights Avenue, just south of the track. And the question is, how can we finance it? That's something that the mayor is committed to studying. What are the options to do that?
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Delegate Rosenberg? Delegate, I don't think there is anyone else signed up. Just checking my list real quick again, sorry. Yes, no one else has signed up. So members, we are done with the hearing on House Bill 988. We're going to move to the other
Thank you.
gaming bill, House Bill 859 from the Cecil County delegation. And we will hear from the first laddie of Cecil County.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And for the record, I am the chair of the Cecil County delegation, so I'll be presenting this bill, impactful legislation. So a little bit of history for the committee. As you may know, Hollywood Casino was the first casino in Maryland. And this all came about after this body passed in 2007 gaming regulations allowing slot machines. Now, when the rate of tax was first established, it was put at 67%. And because Hollywood was the first casino to come on board, that was the rate that they were taxed at. Now, subsequently, other casinos came on board, and through various legislation and budget reconciliation, those subsequent casinos ended up with different tax rates. So what this bill seeks to do is to put us in line with those other casinos that are in Maryland by moving our rate of what we're able to maintain from 33% to 40%, so 7 points. Now, unlike the other casinos that have this more favorable rate, we've actually earmarked these funds that will be coming back to the casino, which are around, if you look at the fiscal note, between 4.7 and 4.9 million, that those funds actually have to be reinvested in the casino. They can only be used for capital improvement, equipment, and basically building out the casino to attract more revenue in. So I would just point to the fiscal note and say that while it does have the numbers on the tax rate, it does not include the numbers that we seek to bring in more customers and generate more revenue for the Educational Trust Fund. And I'd also like to touch on the fact that we're seeing an incredible amount of competition now, not only from in Maryland, they are geographically spread out, but because we're right there in that corner, we have both Delaware Park and now Pennsylvania, who's been very aggressive with placing their casinos as well as sports gaming venues. And to be able to stay competitive, we've got to make improvements to the facility. So I think that this bill strikes a balance. It puts us in a good posture with other casinos and maintains our competitiveness with neighboring jurisdictions. And with that, I'd ask that the committee move favorable. This is a local bill, and we'd love to have local courtesy on it. And it's also cross-filed in the Senate as such. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate. Before Delegate Ebersol's question, I have a question. If that 7 percentage points, not 7%, I heard you clearly.
Yep.
But if those 7 points, if that money is to be invested back in on capital, is there some imagining in time that there won't be that need for that capital investment? And then where might that money have to be? How would it be spent?
So great question. And it's actually a little bit more broad than that. That's my mistake. It's actually marketing, advertising, and promotional cost as well are included in that those 7%. So that is something that would be ongoing in perpetuity, again, to attract more customers and then grow the amount of income and revenue that's going to come into the casino. If that answers your question.
I do want to point out, given that money from this goes to the ETF, it's not really a local bill in the usual sense of a local bill. Delegate Ebersol with a question?
Yes, and I think you might have just covered it in your last comment, but let's just be sure. So the state will realize 7% less of the revenues that are from this. And there's a litany of people that get that money when we collect it for the state. Which of those accounts will suffer by not having that 7% coming into their account?
So the bill as written would only take away from the ETF.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Delegate Ebersol. Delegate Buckle?
Thank you. And Delegate Hornberger, I mean, we all know that there are real differences between the rates at all 6 of our casinos, as you've outlined,
Mhm.
have emerged through some of individualized circumstances over the years. Is it my recollection still correct? I haven't gone back and looked at this, but the facility in your county, is it still the lowest in the state? So your operator only gets 33 cents of every dollar of revenue generated through BLTs, and that's lower than all other casinos, including big boys like MGM and Maryland Live. They all get more.
That's correct. And to just add some context, the thinking at that point in time, because I'm sure there's going to be other questions about, they entered into a contract, they knew what they were getting into. Well, frankly, when they took the step to become the first casino, there were a lot of risk involved. And I wasn't elected then, but there was talk that they might be able to bid on other locations. That did not happen. A lot of things changed in the 10 years where we built out different casinos in the state. And they have been paying that high punitive tax rate since inception. But they've been carrying a lot of water. They were the first to put a footprint here in Maryland. And now they're just asking not to be created more fair, just fair with what the other casinos are currently have. And I will add that there is some precedent and that this body has changed some of the tax rates on other casinos over the years, as well as table games. And we're about to look at sports betting. So I think this is a good time to do the right thing. Thank you, Delegate.
I just had one follow-up. I mean, do you have any idea how many people the Perryville Casino employs in your community? And also, if my recollection holds correct, isn't the casino area being redeveloped, the area like a mile or so from the casino being redeveloped into the Great Wolf Lodge to try to make it a large tourism-centric area right off of 95?
That's correct. So it's one of our largest employers currently. It generates a lot of subsequent, businesses like cleaning and service industry jobs. I believe it's around 400. I can confirm the numbers and get back to you.
Okay.
Parcel, we are currently constructing and have gotten approval to break ground on the largest Great Wolf Lodge on the East Coast. So this is a real opportunity to bring in so many more customers and to keep that facility looking new, having the best equipment, best machines. And again, this isn't 7% in the back pocket of the owners. This 7% has to be spent on building the casino and bringing in new customers. So again, the fiscal note, I think, doesn't look forward as it should. Revenues will definitely go up as a result of marketing and infrastructure to the tune of almost $5 million. And that's why I think that this bill deserves a second look. Thank you, Dr. Buckle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. I was checking my VLT chart here that everyone I'm sure has this at home.
Yep.
Don't you? But that
Right on the refrigerator.
that Hollywood actually gets 39 and not 33, I think, as was stated. But I will direct the members. There is written testimony that shows everyone a comparable chart
That's correct.
that was provided. So just want to
Yep.
make.
And then there's also some charts on the fiscal note as well.
Right. Any other questions for Delegate Hornberger? All right.
Madam Chair, I just had a question for what you said. Is that, I'm looking at the note, is that the 33 is the base rate and then they got 6% as the adjustment for buying their machines?
They got the bump of 6 points. Yeah, back in fiscal 16.
Okay, so what the
For
bill
that
seems-
machine reason, yes.
right? So the bill wants to do is raise their base rate from 33 to 40. Is that your understanding too, Delegate Hornberger?
That's correct. Yep.
So Madam Chair, if I may,
Oh, please.
just since we're clarifying, then that would put them at keeping 46%.
Right, overall, right.
Right,
With
overall.
that adjustment that we made for all of the other casinos to own their machines.
So when you're comparing them to other ones, it's important to have that number in as part of it.
Yes. No, yeah, I understand. It would bring them to 46 where others are anywhere from 44 to 60. So yes.
Correct.
All right. Thank you. Seeing no other questions or clarifications, moving off our racing and gaming, we will move to the economic development portion of our entertainment this afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just kidding. Anyway, House Bill 8005, Delegate Plakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. For the record, I'm Delegate Julie Plakovich-Carr, here to present House Bill 805, which would reform the enterprise zone tax credit. This tax credit dates back to 1982 and aims to help economically distressed communities. The program has good intentions, but unfortunately has lacked oversight. The program is one of the most expensive business tax credits in Maryland, with $599 million awarded over the past 20 years. And even though the costs have grown more than 1,000% since 2001, the program has no statutory restraints on future costs. The bill before you would put some guardrails on this tax credit and aims to make it more effective. Some of my colleagues may recall this bill from last session, as well as other efforts to reform ineffective tax credits. Notably, this committee in the House passed a broader tax credit reform bill last year. That legislation would have put a one-year moratorium on the designation of new enterprise zones. But unfortunately, the Senate didn't act upon the bill before the session adjourned early. There was a compelling case for action last year, and the case has only grown stronger since then. Just last month, the Department of Legislative Services released a comprehensive evaluation of the enterprise zone tax credit. That evaluation recommended consolidation with other similar tax credits, or if that wasn't feasible, then major reforms should be made. Both the 2021 and 2014 DLS evaluations concluded that, quote, enterprise zone tax credits are not effective in creating employment opportunities for enterprise zone residents, end quote. Additionally, the program criteria are, quote, poorly designed and limit the program's effectiveness in promoting economic activity within distressed areas, end quote. DLS also found that money spent in the program are poorly targeted, with only 25 cents going to the most distressed neighborhoods for every dollar going to the least distressed neighborhoods. The reports also found that the program's effectiveness is not being evaluated as is required by law due to a lack of data. To date, none of the recommendations made by DLS have been implemented. The legislation before you would implement DLS's recommendations and would ensure that the program is better targeted and not growing uncontrollably. The bill would put a statutory cap of $50 million on the total annual cost of the program. Other tax credits are subject to annual appropriations or capped in statute. Neither is true for the enterprise zone tax credit. This bill would put a temporary halt to designation of new or expanded enterprise zones should the program exceed $50 million a year. The bill eliminates the job creation portion of the enterprise zone tax credit, as the Department of Commerce sought to do in 2017. Very few businesses are utilizing this tax credit, with only 12 employers being certified in the past 5 years. It is clearly an underutilized tax credit that is not helping people to get jobs. The bill adds criteria for what areas can qualify to be designated as an enterprise zone. For instance, a proposed zone would need to have basic infrastructure in place and be identified in the county's master plan as a priority area for future growth or revitalization. And finally, the bill would improve data collection and program analysis by requiring each county that participates to report certain information to the state. A lack of data sharing by local governments has hamstrung state analysis of the tax credit. The bill has written support from the Maryland Center on Economic Policy, the Maryland Fair Funding Coalition, Maryland Rise, AFT Maryland, and the League of Women Voters. With that, I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Delegate. Having trouble finding myself on the screen. We do have some questions. We'll start with Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Plakovich-Carr, I just had a question I'm trying to figure out. I'm looking at the fiscal note, and they talk about local fiscal effect, and I'm wondering if these two numbers are correlative. They say that in 2020, Baltimore City received 71% of all of the property tax reimbursements pursuant to this program, where Eastern Shore and Western Maryland combined got 7%. And then the remaining 22% went to everywhere else. So does that correlate in your understanding to say that 71% of the credits claimed, at least in the last fiscal year for this program, are from Baltimore City?
I think in a rough sense, you could say that that's true, but because the local property tax rates do vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, it wouldn't be a one-to-one match. But I think in a rough sense,
Right. So you could be off a little bit because their rate may be higher than other jurisdictions, but it's pretty close. And did you, I know you've done a lot of analysis, and I want you to do my homework for me. If you, I'm not quizzing you. Is that pretty typical, or have you found that pretty typical that the overwhelming majority of the value of this credit is just going to one jurisdiction?
So, I mean, that certainly has been a trend in recent years. After sponsoring this bill last year, I did sit down and talk to Department of Commerce and some of their experts and people who actually work on this tax credit over the interim. And they did flag that this is one of those programs that is not being used uniformly kind of across the state, and that Baltimore City has not only designated more areas as enterprise zones, but is in fact making better use of it than other jurisdictions are.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Buckle. Any other questions for Delegate Plakovich-Carr? All right, seeing none, we'll take the one person signed up. We have Michael Sanderson from Mako.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and committee members. It's a pleasure to join you today. I'm Michael Sanderson with the Maryland Association of Counties. We've submitted a written statement on the bill, and I don't think we quarrel with something like 70 or 80 or 90% of the bill. If the sponsor's intention is to increase data and reporting and transparency and accountability with this program, we're all for that. I think counties would be glad to step up and contribute the data and to have this framework for the state agencies that oversee and administer the program, all fine. What we fear, though, is the cap on the participation and the application to income going forward comes awfully close to just letting this program die on the vine. And if I leave you with nothing else, I think the core idea of enterprise zones is one that's worth saving rather than discarding. So even if the administration hasn't been ideal, let's fix it. And I think most of this bill seeks to do that. And I think the sponsor's intentions are absolutely admirable there. But if you cap it and say we can't do more designations while we spend multiple years fixing it out, we might just run out of carrots for what's a really good core idea. That local economic development officers can identify a neighborhood that's run down, that might be a target for this kind of special incentive to bring in business and opportunities that can turn around a part of the county or the county and municipality or across jurisdictions. And to have the state and counties collaborate on the effort to do that, I want to keep that framework intact. And so our opposition to the bill is not, oh, we hate all of this. It's let's fix it, let's polish it up, and let's make it work better. We'd be happy to be partners in that frame of mind.
Mr. Sanderson, I do have a question. Something that you said you like the data parts and you think that there's things to be fixed, but it sounded like the only parts you liked were the data parts and not any of the fixes. So can you clarify that? Do you like any of the actual fixes?
No, I'm sorry if I misspoke, Madam Chair and committee members. I think the pieces of the bill that speak to the process that the Department of Commerce and the Department of Assessments ought to be doing to manage it and oversee and evaluate the program all make sense. And if it turns out we've got zones that haven't been effective, it may be time to phase them out or to call them to a higher standard. Perfectly fine. What we're worried about is the bill seems to say because of this cap for the next year or 2 or 3, we might have a completely non-functioning program. And I think that would be too big of a loss.
And when you say non-functioning, are you discounting the $50 million limit?
There are pieces of the bill that say going forward, there can't be any further designation, and there's limits on income applicability going in for years going forward. That's the piece of the bill we've got a concern about.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Sanderson? Delegate Lutke?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Sanderson, just to clarify, your concern is solely with the limitations on zones over the next couple of years.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, no one else signed up on House Bill 805. We'll move to the next.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanderson. Good to see you, a former Ways and Means staffer who preceded me. Our next bill is House Bill 853, a departmental bill. We have anyone here from the department?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Kelly Schultz, for the record, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Commerce. Thank you so much for having us here today.
Thank you.
I do want to Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I do also want to say that I have my colleague, Darla Garrett. She's our program manager, and she'll be happy to assist me in any technical questions that I cannot answer at this point in time. But we are officially testifying in support of House Bill 853. This is a departmental bill that makes some alterations to our small minority and women-owned business account, also known as our VLT program. We feel these changes will make the program better able to assist small businesses after a disaster or during a sudden crisis like the COVID-19 pandemic. Currently, the VLT program uses a portion of the video lottery terminal revenue from the state's casinos to provide investment capital and loans to small minority and women-owned businesses. However, a number of incidents in recent years, including, to go back a few years, the floods in Ellicott City in 2016 and 18, have shown that businesses in need of quick capital are reluctant to take out additional debt in the form of loans. Furthermore, when the pandemic hit last March, we at Commerce found that statutory limitations on some of our existing programs kept us from being able to deploy funds from one program quickly. And we've all had this conversation before. We are able to work with our fund managers to establish flexible lending terms, and we also created our emergency small business grant and loan programs, but it took time to get those up and running. We certainly hope that we never have to face a situation like the great floods of Ellicott City or this pandemic ever again, but if we do, we want to do better and have more assistance readily available for our small and minority-owned businesses, which were and continue to be particularly vulnerable in a crisis. House Bill 853 expands the capabilities of the VLT program so that if a state of emergency is declared at either the federal or state level, our fund managers would be able to offer financial assistance in the form of a grant, which would not have to be repaid, obviously, or would be able to convert some sort of a VLT loan to a grant, which would reduce the debt burden on an existing business customer. The total amount of a grant or loan converted to a grant could not exceed $50,000 for a single business, and the total amount of assistance the program provides during the state of emergency could not exceed $2.5 million in a fiscal year. This will give Commerce some flexibility that we lacked when we were providing relief to businesses impacted by COVID-19 this past year, and it will help businesses by giving them a new source of assistance that doesn't require them to take on debt. Governor Hogan has already sought to eliminate debt for small businesses who accepted emergency relief loans during the pandemic. He converted $75 million in small business loans to grants at the end of 2020, and the Relief Act, thank you to each and every one of you in this room for passing that, includes a provision that would allow Commerce to forgive emergency loans issued through our MSBITFA program, which is another of our key small business assistance tools. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank every single one of you for making sure that we got this where it needed to be. House Bill 853 extends the same idea to the VLT program as we did in the Relief Act for MSBITFA, right? So this is a good bill for Maryland small businesses and their employees, and it's a good bill for Maryland's economy. It will help businesses keep the lights on and the doors open after a sudden disaster or crisis. However, there is one thing that I do not have in my written testimony, and this is actually related to the Relief Act and the implementation of the Relief Act. And it's a possible way of amending this bill in order to be able to further address the implementation of the Relief Act. We've become concerned with how to get the additional funding out. And as I mentioned previously, our experience over the last 11 months has shown that businesses are not willing to take on more debt at this time, regardless of the extent of their need. We would like to propose potentially amending this bill to be emergency legislation. That way, if it is the will of this committee and the General Assembly as a whole to pass this bill, it can become effective immediately, and our fund managers can begin immediately getting the $10 million provided through the Relief Act bill to businesses in need in forms of grants as quickly as possible. I believe that to be the intent of the committee. I believe that if we do that, we are going to follow both the intentions of the House and the Senate chambers and the governor as we continue to move forward. So with that, Madam Chair, I propose and suggest a positive vote on House Bill 853 and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Is Ms. Garrett here to testify or to answer technical questions?
She's here to address any questions should you have any.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Secretary Schultz or Ms. Garrett? You did that great of a job, Madam Secretary. Thank you.
Well, so I motion to approve and move forward. I'm not allowed to do that, though, am I, Madam
No,
Chair?
sorry. Sorry about that. Maybe next time.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. To members, that's, I apologize. We do have one more. No, that is correct. No one else signed up for this bill. The next bill we have is Delegate Buckle, House Bill 884.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an incredibly simple bill. It simply extends the life cycle of the task force on the economic future of Western Maryland, which members of this committee were very generous to work with me last year to help establish. We have several pieces of substantive legislation, many of which the committee will hear. I'm going to be doing one of them in front of the Economic Matters Committee here in a few minutes. Others will come to this committee. But because of COVID-19 and the restrictions associated therewith, while we were able to conduct a lot of activities virtually for the task force and get a lot of participation, we were not able to do some of the things that we intended to do in terms of in-person meetings and bringing in private sector individuals, entrepreneurs, and actually doing some tours of the 3 Western counties for economic development purposes. And so Senator Edwards, who is the co-chair of the committee, and myself would request the indulgence of the committee to simply extend the life cycle of the task force into later this year so that hopefully COVID situation abates and we're able to do more of the things we'd like to do this summer or early fall before issuing a final report. That's it.
Thanks, Delegate. Any questions for Delegate Buckle? All right, thank you. Seeing no other questions, we will move to House Bill 987, Delegate Chi. I don't see her here in the moment. That's supposed to be our last economic development bill. She has the next 2 bills. All right, let's, all right, we're gonna switch that order for a second. Is Delegate, I don't see Delegate Brooks here. Delegate Charles, House Bill 864. Delegate Charles, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. All right, that's not working either. Delegate McKay, I think, did I see you here?
Yes, Madam Chair.
House Bill
I'm here.
888.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the opportunity today to present House Bill 888. Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. In short, this bill helps those of the fire and EMS community who at no fault of their own were unable to respond to either calls or work fundraisers due to COVID-19. These individuals, mostly elderly administrative volunteers who are on a fixed income, have been prevented to obtain the points to qualify for the income subtraction on their taxes. We have offered 2 amendments to the committee. It is in your file. One of those amendments is to make this an emergency bill to allow the 2020 and 2021 taxes to be affected. And secondly, is to make this bill a regional bill, only to affect Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington counties, not statewide. So I urge a favorable vote on House Bill 88, income tax subtraction modification for volunteer fire rescue and emergency medical services members, active status point. I'd be glad to answer any questions you or your committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Questions, Delegate Lutke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate, thanks for the bill. But I'm curious, you mentioned an amendment to narrow the bill so it only affects Western Maryland counties. Why do that? Because I would imagine that volunteer departments all across the state.
Well, according to MSFA, they're concerned of it being a statewide bill, that some of those other departments in other counties are working something else out. And so they requested that it become just a regional bill for Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington County, which I do have support of those three counties, sir.
All right. Delegate Buckle?
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask Mike or Delegate McKay. So we're not increasing the size of the credit in any way or changing. My understanding is all we're really doing is allowing these volunteers who weren't able to get their hours in as they normally would to meet the eligibility criteria because of COVID-19. Now they'll be able to continue to qualify. It's not changing the formula for how much they get or increasing the money or anything like that.
Correct. That is 100% correct. We're not changing the formula. It's only for 2020 and 2021. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, they were not able to meet their hours. These are most elderly people that are already counting on this tax credit. And so it's just one of those things that they work these activities, they end up getting the tax credit. And there really is no, while I disagree with the fiscal note, there really is nothing in the fiscal note that, really will be, it's artificially saying it's going to affect it. Those people would have already.
That was my question.
Yes, sir.
Right. So those people, when it says, well, revenues may decrease, that's just based on an assumption that because of COVID-19, less people were going to qualify as volunteers. And we're just trying to set that right and saying, look, we'll basically have the same expenditure for the program that we would have had in prior years.
That's exactly correct. Very similar to with the unemployment, looking at 2020 just never happening. We're looking at the same thing for 2021 for these people as well.
Thank you.
I did forget that it has been cross-filed in the Senate, and those amendments have been offered as well. So if it was the grace of this committee to pass it and it went to the House, it would be in the same posture as the Senate version.
Thank you, Delegate. We do have another question for you from Delegate Hartman.
Thank you. Is there any parameter or qualifier that this person would have qualified last year or in previous years to show that they are truly someone that has done this and impacted by COVID?
The overall low SAP points and that kind of stuff does indicate that you have to be enrolled. And in this modification, it takes into consideration that you had to already work some of the hours for this year. So as my understanding, the way it works, that is covered, that somebody just doesn't jump in and then get the tax credit.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Delegate. Seeing no other questions for Delegate McKay, we are done with the hearing on House Bill 888. We will move on to our next bill. Delegate Brooks, House Bill 778.
Thank you, Chairman Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of HB 778. This is the Healthy Indoor Quality Tax Credit. The purpose of this bill is to provide a tax credit for the installation of indoor air quality equipment, as IAQ, in certain residential and commercial properties. Qualifying residential properties includes the tax residence or a single multifamily residential rental property with 4 or fewer units, and the tax credit may not exceed $1,000 for individuals in residential property and $2,000 for small businesses. Indoor air quality equipment means equipment that is installed by a licensed heating and ventilation, air conditioning contractor. We call them HVACs, and improve the air quality, including enhanced ventilation and filtration systems. During these unprecedented times resulting from COVID-19, individuals are spending an insurmountable amount of time in their homes. Now more than ever, this is important to keep to have proper ventilation, put it that way. Yeah. Furthermore, it is equally important for small businesses to offer a quality clean air workplace for their employees. The installation of the IAQ technology offers the security and help in eliminating the spread of viruses. The CEJA, Clean Energy Jobs Act, set goals at 50% of renewable by 2030. Last session, the legislative body altered CEJA by altering the definition of clean energy industry to include HVACs. HB 778 provides an incentive to homeowners, landlords, and small business owners to upgrade their HVAC systems. This will help secure healthier, clean air quality for residents, tenants, and employees, while moving them one step closer to securing energy efficiency. For that reason, I request a favorable report, and I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you, Delegate Brooks. We have a question from Delegate Barnes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate Brooks.
Sure, Delegate Brooks.
Is there a size limit on this small business, or can my local high school also qualify for this tax credit?
Right, we would go with the same definition that the federal government used for small business.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about
there is a limit. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, what about high schools or junior high schools, elementary? Are they able to qualify for that?
Well, they'd be only if they could be classified as small business.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. We do have a couple other questions, Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Brooks, this is a really interesting idea. And I had a question, kind of same idea, I think, as Delegate Barnes, but applied to the individual, to the residential home component of the bill.
Yes.
Is there a cap, or would you be willing to discuss a cap with respect to the assessed value of the home, so that this credit is going for more the sort of middle class, so to speak, homeowner, as opposed to, we're fortunate in Maryland, here in Annapolis, they're multi-million-dollar homes. And the way I read the bill, the credit would still apply for them, for those individuals.
Yeah, well, we can entertain it. I think that there is an amendment that that's going to be included. That's going to cap 30% of it has to go to low income. So in that respect, that would be somewhat of a cap. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Delegate Palakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate Brooks. Actually, I'm just looking through the amendment that you uploaded into the floor system with your testimony. And I'm wondering if you can just briefly walk through that, given what you just mentioned about having an income limit. I'm a big fan of means testing tax credits. And if you could speak more to what is included in your amendment, I would appreciate that.
Okay, sure. All right, let me grab that real quick. Alrighty, let me grab that real quick. Sometimes I got wrong now. I had three bills. I'm sorry, I had three bills today and got amendments all over the place. So hold on. Okay, and that we're putting a cap on the amount of $3 million. That's the maximum can be spent. Okay, low income household, they require at least 30% of the residential tax credit would go to low income. And that is defined by what 200% of the federal FPL, federal poverty line. Yeah. So that would limit that here again to the low income people, that particular guideline. Yeah. So, all right. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions for Delegate Brooks, we do have 3 people signed up. We'll start with John Van Horn. Not logging in. All right, Michael Wheat.
Hello, thank you, Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee. I really appreciate the opportunity to testify today in support of HB 788, the Healthy Indoor Air Quality Tax Credit. My name is Michael Wheat. I'm president of James A. Wheat & Sons, a family-owned and operated HVAC company based in Gaithersburg, Maryland. I'm also a member and former president of the Association of Air Conditioning Professionals, that's AACP, and I'm honored to be representing the trade association of HVAC professionals here today. On behalf of my small family-owned business in the AACP, I respectfully ask the committee to report this bill favorably. AACP member companies are leaders in the HVAC industry and in the installation of indoor air quality equipment. We represent small businesses and local jobs that are critical to Maryland's economy, and we provide essential HVAC services to homes, businesses, and other facilities. This bill would directly benefit public health, helping Maryland families and small businesses afford better indoor air. Supporting healthy indoor air quality and strategies to help mitigate viral transmission indoors are key to the state's public health efforts now as we get through this pandemic, as well as into the future. I'd particularly like to talk about how this bill would help Maryland families afford important investments in their health. In my work, I've seen that the average home uses standard throwaway filters that do not capture any particles that would help in making the home more healthy, much less have a filter system that would capture virus-sized particles. In the last decade, I've seen only about 10 fresh air systems in an existing home. My company recently installed a new air filtration system for a family in Bethesda whose child suffers from asthma. The system was installed, filters down to virus-sized particles, and we added a fresh air intake system. So now they're filtering their home 24/7, bringing in fresh air to make their air within the home more healthy. They told me they've seen a massive reduction in asthmatic reactions within the home since the upgrades. It doesn't get much better than making the life of a child better. We've submitted written testimony which goes into more detail on the long-term benefits of these technologies and how the bill would simultaneously support local contracting jobs by requiring that the installation be done by a licensed Maryland contractor to ensure it's done properly by a trained professional. So in closing, I hope that you would consider advancing this bill to help more Marylanders breathe healthier indoor air. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And we have John Van Horn.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of this healthy indoor air quality tax credit. My name is John Van Horn, and I'm a general manager of Arundel Cooling and Heating, a small business HVAC company based in Ithaca, Maryland, that has been family-owned and operated since 1971. I also serve as board president for the Heating and Air Conditioning Contractors of Maryland, also known as HACC. And I'm honored to be representing our trade association of over 150 member companies here today. HCC respectfully asks the committee to vote in favor of this bill. The purpose of this bill is to help Maryland families and small business make the investment in indoor air quality improvements that can help mitigate the spread of COVID through these difficult months ahead, as well as supporting health over the long term. In my work, we see air quality issues every day, whether in the homes or in small businesses. This is definitely a significant need to be addressed. This bill could go a really long way in terms of helping struggling businesses and struggling families be able to make these important improvements. We're talking about proven technologies like high MERV filters, which keep the air clean by filtering out very fine particles, and bipolar ionizers, which can be installed in the ductwork and send negative charges to deactivate viral cells. Unfortunately, these solutions haven't been widely implemented yet, and especially now in the context of COVID and our economic crisis. Small businesses and families could use help to afford these indoor air quality improvements. This bill would also help support local jobs. My company, for example, employs 12 HVAC technicians who are trained to install these technologies. The bill specifically requires that the equipment be installed by a Maryland licensed HVAC contractor to ensure that the work is done by professionals who have the necessary training to understand how to install the technologies properly and how they fit into the HVAC system as a whole. The Healthy Indoor Air Quality Tax Credit would help our local small businesses reopen safely in the months ahead and help Maryland families improve the health and safety of their homes. For all these reasons, I respectfully ask for a favorable report on this bill. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you so much. Next person to testify is Kaylee Locklear.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and honorable members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, Kaylee Locklear here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Association in support of this bill. I submitted written, so I'll just keep it short, but we support any and all efforts to help alleviate costs for consumers and businesses to invest in infrastructure to mitigate illness. This type of investment is forward thinking, and obviously it will help with other airborne illnesses impacting consumers, employees, and businesses, not just now, but in the future. We're supportive of the amendments that the sponsor offered to alleviate the fiscal note concerns, but I'd also point out that the effective date of the bill is July 1. So if the committee decides to move the bill, it may make more sense to make it an emergency bill, as it would be highly beneficial now. And I'm glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Locklear. Any questions for Mr. Horn, Mr. Wheat, or Ms. Locklear? All right. Thank you all very much. We're done with the hearing on House Bill 778. Thank you, Delegate Brooks. Let me just see if we still don't have Delegate Chi. We'll go to Delegate Charles, House Bill 864.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the Ways and Means Committee. Good afternoon. My name is Delegate Nick Charles, and I just want to thank you for allowing me to have the ability to come in and testify on behalf of HB 864. This bill serves as a catalyst to help some of our most vulnerable veterans in the state of Maryland, those who gave so much of their life to this country and to this state. So with this bill, who this bill truly helps, it's those who are retired and those who are 100% service-connected, have a service-connected disability from the VA. And I just want to run down some numbers to give you all understanding that this isn't a large group of people, but a very, very, very small subset group that we have in the state. There are a total of 55,000 veterans who have retired in the state of Maryland. The number of disabled veterans that we have in the state are 92,000. The number of retired and disabled veterans who don't necessarily have 100%, they can have a rating from 1 to 100% in the VA is 7,000. The amount of veterans who have 100% service-connected disability through the VA is only 700. We're talking about 700 people. And out of that 700, that does not equal out to all of those members being retired. So we're possibly looking at roughly around 400 veterans across the state of Maryland who would actually qualify for this tax exemption of $30,000 off of their retirement income. And like I said, this is to truly help those who gave it all. When we talk about helping those with mental health issues across the state, these are folks who are coming back from war with PTSD, folks who are coming back from war with missing limbs. And I want to make sure that Maryland takes care of these individuals and these veterans and give them the help that they need, especially during a time like this with COVID impacting our country, impacting our state. I think we need to make sure we lift our veterans up, especially those who have been hurt the hardest with everything that has come their way. I have a panel of individuals from different veterans organizations who have signed up, and I'm not sure if they have already signed in to get on to testify. But Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair, I would like to pass on the remainder of my time to my sponsor panel. Thank you for having me.
Two things. One, there's no sharing of time and there's no panels this session. The first person's, I'm sorry, does anyone have any questions for Delegate Charles? All right, thank you. Seeing none, we'll move on to Diana Bergman. Go ahead.
Okay, hi, greetings, Ways and Means Committee. My name is Diana Bergman, and I'm asking for a favorable report for House Bill 0864, income tax subtraction modification to the military retirement income. I'm in support of legislation that will provide a subtraction of the Maryland taxable income for military retirees. Personally, regardless of age, a veteran's disability pay shouldn't be taxed. It isn't at the federal level, and it shouldn't be at the state level. I'm here to share our story as a military family who has honorably served for 18 years and 2 months in the United States Army. Before I go on, please make sure to include our blue buddies in the United States Space Force in the language of House Bill 0864. My husband has a 2-year and 10 months left before retiring from the United States Army. He is our sole household provider, and we have 3 amazing boys. Each one of our children have been born in different states: Florida, Washington, California. We have firsthand knowledge of what multiple states offer to our military veterans and retirees. Our average household income after taxes is around $6,500 monthly, and this includes my husband's base pay, our basic household allowance, and bonus pay. In addition, we still have to pay our affordable dental insurance, vision insurance, and without out-of-pocket expenses. And our primary care coverage is free because we have chosen to use our military treatment facilities. One of our children has access to an extended healthcare coverage known as ECHO. All 3 children are enrolled in the EF&P program. Maryland is not considered a very military-friendly retirement state. Upon my husband's retirement, he is guaranteed only 50% of his base pay, which is roughly under $1,625 monthly after taxes. He is a veteran who has served in Operation Iraq Freedom, and he may qualify for a percentage of eligibility as a disabled veteran. We have been raising our family here in Maryland since 2011. Our yearly household income is around $78,000 a year. I'm asking you, delegates of the Ways and Means Committee, how does the Bergman family find ways and means to live off a yearly income of $19,500 yearly? General Norman, Stormy Norman, the bear, Swords Call, once said, "The truth of the matter is you will always know the right thing to do. The hard part is doing it." I'm asking for a favorable report for House Bill 0868. Please don't have us stand by another year while Maryland military retirees family leave Maryland. We would like to stay here if only our military retirement income wasn't taxed so high. Tax us less, or better yet, don't tax us at all. Wouldn't you rather us stay to help make Maryland better? And it is a very small percentage of those families that qualify for this. It's not just their retirement, but also if they've obtained a disability by a very
Ms.
small.
Bergman,
So thank you.
your time is up.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Spate, William Spate.
Okay. All right. Can you see me?
I can hear you and I cannot see you, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, greetings, committee. My name is William Spate. I'm the current commander of American Legion Post 196, Suitland, Maryland. I come to support this bill mainly because I have several members that are of 100% retired disability, and I know any tax on them is truly hurting them. And I agree with the young lady that spoke previous that as a military veteran that has retired from U.S. Coast Guard, that I think that any tax on any military retirement or anything, I think is driving a lot of people that I personally know to Pennsylvania, which is my home state, and also Delaware, and a lot of moving down to North Carolina. I can honestly say that when Maryland really, I'm praying that Maryland does step up to help retired veterans a lot more. I just know a lot of people I got friends in Virginia that work in Maryland that say that they would love to move to Maryland, but the taxes are just too crazy here on military retirement. So I do support this bill, Madam Chair, and I hope that that y'all really think about what's going on here with any type of tax on any type of military retirement. So thank you for your time, and just thank you. And I hope y'all really think about this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your service. We next have signed up Lynn Nash.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Vice Chairman. I don't think you can see me, so let me do that. My name is Lynn Nash. I'm a retired captain, having served 30 years in both the Army and the United States Public Health Service. I'm also just one of the 176,000 Maryland residents who's a Gulf War veteran. I spent almost 7 months in Scud Alley as an 8th Evacuation Hospital ICU head nurse at an air base outside of Dhahran, where we were downrange from the oil fires. Our hospital and the surrounding compounds underwent 32 consecutive nights where our chemical alarms alerted, which meant that every service member and every hospital patient, 500 of them, immediately went into full chemical suits for hours. Shortly after returning from deployment, I began having autoimmune issues. I have had to have both hips replaced and my neck fused as a result of my autoimmune rheumatoid arthritis. While I have the full use of my limbs, you may be surprised that I have 100% service-connected disability rating. I'm also one of the 84,000 other Marylanders who receive disability compensation. So to continue with my Gulf War experience, of the 500 members of my hospital team, I was one of a handful that completed a retirement, a full retirement. So, but unfortunately, because of my health issues, I've been unable to pursue my lifelong dream, which was to become a nursing faculty. I can't do that because of my health. So I'm here today in support of the bill. I think $30,000 of subtraction for my retirement pay would be very welcome. But I also want to echo something that you've heard. After my husband retires, I'm leaving. I'm giving up my home, even though we really love it. And I have to tell you, it is expensive to live here. As of January of 2020, 31 states don't tax military retirement pay at all. You might not know it, but Maryland ranks 19th in the number of veterans, but 31st in the rankings of best states for veterans to live. Because of your taxation policies, the state is denying itself income from second career, extremely marketable retirees with skills and security clearances, things that are coveted by the defense, intelligence, and cybersecurity sectors of the state economy. So Maryland can become much more competitive in this arena by enacting legislation to better treat military retirement income, such as this bill and a bill you're about to hear, HB 951. So as a lifelong member of the Commissioned Officers Association of the United States Public Health Service, we have 1,200 service members in the state. And through the Maryland Military Coalition, I join with 150,000 military-connected people in our state to endorse this bill. I appreciate your interest and thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your service. Are there any questions for any of the three people who testified? All right, thank you all for coming in today. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Delegate Charles. We are done with the hearing on House Bill 864. We will move next to Let me just see if Delegate Chi has not joined us. Delegate Parrott, House Bill 963.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and committee. And I have to say, I like that Maryland flag right behind you, Chairwoman. Looks great with the red background. Now, I miss having a PowerPoint. I have one here, but I'm not going to go through it. Yes, this bill is basically a sales and use exemption for firearm safety devices. Of course, you know, each year people are accidentally fall victim to shootings because a firearm is not properly secured, and helping people to secure them would eliminate some of those issues. And basically, this bill allows people to go out and get a firearm lock that's going to be most appropriate for the person that wants it. So some people could have one that's a fingerprint opening or a quick lock, where you just type in a code and be able to quickly get to that firearm. And then those folks would more likely use the locks than the kind that are a little less expensive, where maybe it's like a bicycle lock, where it's harder to get to. So I think encouraging people in Maryland to get the better locks are going to help increase safety of our firearm devices that are out there. We wouldn't be alone in this. Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Washington, Michigan, they all have passed legislation that waives the sales tax for gun safety locks in their states. And there's no limit to the upper end of what they're saying they wouldn't have the sales tax to. But this bill says it's only the first $500 when you're buying a gun safety lock. That first $500 would not be taxed, but the rest of it would be. I know I've come before this committee in the past, and there was a concern that if someone bought a very, very expensive gun safe, that they could get that without paying any sales tax at all. And this is not the purpose. Really, this is just trying to get to the most people so they can get the best gun safety device for their firearms. Of course, by passing this bill, we create more safety in the home. We'd encourage people to get the proper firearm safety devices for them. It would protect against unauthorized use and accidental discharge, and it would encourage people to buy safer storage units, such as a gun safe, which are more likely to be used, of course, and more convenient for the user. The fiscal note says there is an $81,000 setup fee, just a one-time fee. That really seems high to me, because all that is mailing people who are paying the sales tax. They do those letters anyway, so it really doesn't add. I don't think that's even going to be actual, because they already do that anyway once a year. So this doesn't add to that. It's not a new mailing or something. And it does estimate the fiscal note a loss in tax revenues of $550,000 per year. But I believe that's a very small cost to pay for the increased safety that we would get in Maryland. And of course, the question is, how much is one life worth? And with that, I just urge this committee to please pass House Bill 963 so we can all be doing all we can to promote firearm safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Delegate Parrott? Delegate Shoemaker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Parrott, so this iteration of the bill this year, I mean, this doesn't cover gun safes, it just covers the locks, is that right?
No, it covers gun safes and gun locks, but only the first $500 in whatever the person is buying would be exempt from the sales and use tax.
Does that answer your question, Delegate Shoemaker? He's now off screen. We will assume it does. Delegate Parrott, thank you. We do have a few people signed up in favor. We'll start with John Jocelyn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thanks, committee.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. John Jocelyn speaking on behalf of 2A Maryland. Maryland gun owners do contribute to the state treasury in a number of ways. We contribute indirectly through the Pittman-Robertson Act, which is an 11% tax on firearms and ammunition. These funds are then returned to the states to help support wildlife projects. We contribute through state sales tax on firearms, ammunition, hunting equipment, and so forth. We contribute through hunting license fees, which help support the DNR. There are hundreds of volunteer firearms instructors who teach the state mandated training courses in hunter safety and firearms safety. This is an opportunity for the committee to help us promote firearms safety by joining with us and participating in this effort to promote safety with a favorable report on House Bill 963. I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We next have Jeffrey Bukowski.
Thank you. I'm a big supporter of the Second Amendment and gun rights. I would just like to state extra that I would like to promote safety. Everything that we try to do around here is safety, bringing in, and let not people going out of the state to buy stuff. It would help promote people buying stuff in the state, helping our county, helping our state. I'm in Washington County, and we are very close to West Virginia. We're very close to Pennsylvania, 10 miles, I believe, the difference between the two. So it's very easy for somebody to go across the state line and buy something. If there's anything we can do to keep the sales in this state, I think we should do it. And anything we can do to help promote safety is probably my biggest support for this legislation. I just think it's a no-brainer deal for the state of Maryland.
Thank you, sir. Next, we'll have Daniel Carlin Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, members of the committee, for hearing me today. Thank you, Delegate Parrott, for introducing this legislation. My name is Daniel Carlin Weber. I am a Maryland State Police qualified handgun instructor and regularly teach the handgun qualification license course that's required in order to be able to purchase a handgun in this state. And one of the parts of that course is, of course, on firearm safety. Mainly, there's a great part of it that deals with firearm storage and how to properly do that. Now, when you purchase a handgun in the state of Maryland, it does come with one of a couple locks. Generally, when you purchase a new handgun, it's going to come with the lock that comes from the manufacturer. And then it's going to come with a separate lock that Maryland law requires be offered for sale that you must get if you're purchasing a handgun. The problem is these locks are wholly inadequate for proper firearm storage. I generally tell my students that they shouldn't rely on them. If it's all they have and it's all they can afford, that's one thing, but it is not something that people should rely on. They should go to a fixed storage solution that actually prevents access to the firearm itself. The problem with the locks that come with these guns is nothing stops anyone from just taking the gun and disabling the lock somewhere else. And if you refer to my written testimony, I actually provide an example. Some of you who watch YouTube might be familiar with the lockpicking lawyer, but one of the approved safety devices on Maryland's roster for what can be offered with a firearm when you purchase the handgun is the interbore lock, and he quickly disables it with very basic skills. There's another lock called the Omega lock, which also goes down the barrel in a similar fashion, but that one he even has less trouble with. He uses a Bic pen to disable that lock. And that YouTube video is clearly out there. Anyone who has a Bic pen at home can easily defeat this. So the point in supporting legislation like this is you're giving an incentive for gun owners to find better means of security, whether that be a larger safe, whether that be a quick access locker, or some sort of other device, just something more stout and more protective than what currently comes with a gun when you buy it. It is not something that you should rely upon. Those are very cheap and expensive locks, and they're easily defeatable. So any sort of incentive to increase firearm safety and to encourage people to buy safes here in Maryland, I think that is a good thing, and we should support that. So for that, I urge a favorable report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Katie Novotny is our next speaker.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. Thank you, Delegate Parrott, for bringing this bill. So if you refer to my written testimony, I have links to a bunch of safes and different locking devices that are available. I went on Tractor Supply's website. Most places in this state have a Tractor Supply kind of within a reasonable distance, and they offer a number of different storage solutions. And I offer list some prices for those, kind of keeping them in the sub $500 range. So there is a project called Project Child Safe. It's ran by the National Shooting Sports Federation, and they provide free cable locks. Now, those aren't ideal, but for a lot of people, a free cable lock that at least doesn't allow a handgun to be fired or a firearm to be fired is going to be better than nothing at all. But the legislature this year is considering a bill, Senate Bill 479 and House Bill 200. This is Jalen's law. I don't know if the members of this committee are familiar with that bill, but that dramatically increases the storage requirements of firearms. And if this bill passes, having access even to an unloaded firearm will cause a person to be in violation of that storage bill. So there's a whole lot of people in this state right now. So this is a really timely bill that if this bill passes, they're going to need to buy a safe. And where I live, I'm in District 7. I'm very close to Delaware. You know, everybody knows on this committee, I'm sure, a lot of people drive to Delaware to buy big ticket items. So, you know, for me, it's fairly easy. Hop on 95, you know, skip the tolls, all the things to get to Delaware and buy a large ticket item. But there's a lot of people in our state, particularly lower income areas, people without transportation. You know, a lot of these items, there's not public transportation to go out of state to buy something like this. So they're going to rely on stuff closer to them. And a bill like this that can reduce the tax credit, the tax burden, which under this bill, $500 limit. So that's only $30 in sales tax. But for some people, that's not a lot of money. But for some people, that could be the difference between buying a security device that's going to actually keep that gun secure and comply with this Jalen's law this month or 2 or 3 months from now, by the time they're able to save up that extra difference in money. So I request a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker on the bill is Paul Chicalos. If I said that correctly, I don't know if I saw Paul on here. Okay, any questions of these last speakers? Seeing none, thank you, Delegate Parrott and the folks who spoke on this bill. We appreciate it. Members of the committee, we'll move on to our next bill. Is Delegate Shi on with us? No, no one's here. Okay. To Parrott. Let's just go to Delegate Polakovich. Delegate Polakovich, did you go already? I apologize.
I have a second bill.
You have a second bill? Okay, let's go to that one. Okay, cool. Let's go to that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
For the record, I'm Delegate Julie Polakovich-Carr, here to present House Bill 804, which would create a financial reward program for whistleblowers who help the state to detect tax fraud. Tax evasion is happening here in Maryland. Fraud is often completely invisible because individuals and companies use methods that keep their fraud hidden. Because federal and state taxes are based on self-reporting, tax authorities are frequently unaware of non-compliance until and unless an audit is conducted. Whistleblowers can help in this regard. They can create information about tax evasion. But coming forward with that information usually comes at a great professional cost who faces the loss of their job or other retaliation by their employer. This legislation would provide a reward of 15 to 30% of the taxes, penalties, and interest collected by the state as a result of the information the whistleblower provided to the comptroller's office. Based on the experiences of other jurisdictions, we can expect that this reward program will increase the state's detection of underpaid taxes and will result in more taxes being collected by the state. The bill is modeled on the IRS Whistleblower Office, which has successfully recouped billions of dollars in unpaid taxes for the federal government. In fiscal year 2019 alone, the IRS collected over $600 million in proceeds from cases brought forward by whistleblowers. Many of these tax code violations would not have been caught without the involvement of whistleblowers. The U.S. Treasury's Inspector General for Tax Administration found in its review of the program that audits based on whistleblower information were nearly twice as productive as normal IRS audits. The legislation is targeted to cases that involve $250,000 or more of unpaid taxes. Additionally, the cases must involve an individual or married couple in Maryland's top income tax bracket, or cases involving a business with gross receipts of at least $2 million per year. Focusing on the wealthiest taxpayers is a proven compliance strategy. According to the U.S. Treasury's Inspector General for Tax Administration, quote, high income taxpayers have the most opportunity to engage in tax avoidance planning, end quote. This is borne out in IRS audit data, which shows that high income taxpayers owe the largest amounts of unpaid taxes and that audits of these taxpayers have the highest return on investment. The bill builds upon the current compliance activities already conducted by the Comptroller's Office. Comptroller staff already investigate tips from informants who report suspected tax fraud, but such reporting is not incentivized, nor is the option readily publicized. The bill also requires the comptroller to annually report metrics about the program and to highlight notable tax avoidance schemes so that the General Assembly can make appropriate changes in state tax laws. Finally, the bill extends the statute of limitations on collection of unpaid taxes from 7 years to 10 years to ensure that the state has sufficient time to detect tax fraud and recoup the money. This conforms with the time frame used by the IRS and most of our neighboring jurisdictions, including Pennsylvania, Delaware, West Virginia, and the District of Columbia. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Any questions? Delegate Hartman. All right, maybe that was by accident. Delegate Lukey until Delegate Hartman shows his face.
Thank you, Mr.
I'm
Chairman.
here now.
Oh,
Can you hear?
go ahead.
Oh, you're here now? Okay, go ahead. Delegate Hartman.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Delegate Carr, is
Delegate,
there any penalty?
Delegate Hartman, you're not showing up on screen.
I'm driving and trying to be compliant with the laws.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Is there any penalty for someone that reports a false report and intentionally just somebody to wreak havoc on someone else's life?
So this legislation doesn't include that. I'm actually not sure under current state law if there is a penalty for that. As I noted in my testimony, the Comptroller's Office right now does accept not even anonymous tips or information provided to their compliance division. And as they told me a few months ago, they do investigate every one of those that comes in. So even if something is sent anonymously, handwritten on a piece of paper, they look into those now. So I'm not sure under current law if there's any penalties for someone who provides false information to the Comptroller's Office. I can find out and get back to you.
Thank you for that follow-up. And secondly, why would it bother you if at any level someone is fraudulent with their taxes? Why limit it to just the wealthy? Why not anyone who is committing fraud?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Everybody should be complying with tax law. Really, we put those thresholds in place based off of the experience of the federal program and then also some other states that have kind of a slightly different method of going about addressing tax fraud that's done through lawsuits. But in all those jurisdictions, they have had thresholds to limit it to cases that involve large amounts of back taxes being owed and to individuals or businesses that have higher revenues. And that simply is because it is a more productive and effective use of the comptroller's staff time in terms of the amount of money that ends up getting recouped. If you're going after somebody who only makes $20,000 a year, the amount of potential back taxes is pretty small. If you're talking about an entity that makes significantly more money, the potential rewards for the state relative to the time invested is much higher.
I just compare it to saying, someone that steals a candy bar, we shouldn't pursue it. Theft is theft, fraud is fraud. And it seems discriminatory in having that language in the bill, but thank you for answering.
Delegate Lukey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Polakovich-Carr. So I'm curious about the fiscal note because it came back with a fairly substantial fiscal note, but I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to the fiscal note writer. I mean, my understanding of your testimony and reading of the bill is that there is no cost to the state unless a person offers a tip that turns out to be founded. And to the extent that's not happening, right? Are they saying that there are people making enough reports now that we would lose money? I'm just confused by the fiscal note.
Yeah, so they came in and said that they would need one additional deputy attorney general to basically administer the program. I mean, otherwise, I was a little bit surprised to see that. I have not talked to the fiscal note writer. Certainly right now in terms of compliance issues, it depends on whether or not the case actually gets elevated to being considered tax fraud. That is a different legal standard. I'm not a lawyer, but that's what I've been told, than just, you haven't paid your taxes and you owe back money. So if a case involves fraud, I think that's when the Attorney General's office gets looped in. Otherwise, if it's just something where the comptroller's office can go after the taxpayer and get them to actually pay back taxes, that is handled with existing staff resources.
So why do they need another deputy comptroller?
Actually, a deputy attorney general. So
Deputy attorney. Oh,
digging
okay.
in on that
I got
case,
you.
yeah.
I got you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Delegate Palagovich-Carr? Madam Chair, would you like to step in here?
Sure. Thank you. Had to step away for a few minutes. Appreciate that. Next person to testify is Jeb White.
Right, Madam Chair, honorable members of the Ways and Means Committee, I'm Jeb White, licensed Maryland attorney. I'm also the president and CEO of Taxpayers Against Fraud. It's a national public interest organization that's dedicated to combating fraud against the federal and state governments and protecting whistleblowers across the country. The last time I appeared before this body was in support of the Maryland False Claims Act a few years ago. And this body supported that legislation. That law is now on the books, recovering government dollars that have been lost to fraud, waste, and abuse. This law that we're talking about today, and I congratulate Delegate Palagovich-Carr for pushing this important law forward, this legislation forward, and proposing it to you guys today, because it's needed to close the fraud loophole on the front end. So the False Claims Act is to go after fraud on government programs, but the problem is that fraud involving money that should be arriving in your coffers is not currently covered under the False Claims Act. And the False Claims Act that you guys passed was modeled after the Federal False Claims Act that came into being in the Civil War and then was strengthened under President Reagan. You may remember the $900 hammers and the $3,000 filibusteers and all that fun stuff that happened. And since then, since 1986, the False Claims Act has recovered $68 billion. But what the federal government recognized and what Congress recognized is that they, again, weren't recovering the tax dollars that should have come in, were fraudulently kept from the government coffers. So in 2006 and 2007, they put in place the IRS Whistleblower program that we were talking about at the beginning of today. And that law, that program has recovered $6.4 billion since 2007. We're talking about substantial funds, and the legislation that's being proposed today is modeled after that very program. So the question that a lot of people have is, why do we need whistleblowers? So when it comes to these complex high dollar fraud schemes, and we are talking about high dollar fraud schemes, and I would encourage keeping those limitations in place so that the focus really truly is on the biggest tax fraud cheats that are undermining your programs. We're talking about complex fraud that does best in the dark. Those complex fraud schemes, you truly need an insider to come forward, and you have to incentivize these people to risk their lives sometimes and their livelihoods oftentimes to step forward and encourage them to highlight the fraud schemes that are preventing Maryland from receiving tax dollars. And this is important right now, especially as you guys look at taxing, for example, digital goods from out-of-state companies, post-Wayfair. There's a lot of easy tax fraud schemes that simply are flying under the radar right now that you need people to come forward to highlight the fraud schemes that are going on. So the success of the IRS program, other states
Mr.
are
White,
already. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. White, your time has expired.
Oh, I apologize.
All right, thank you. Did you have a last sentence to give us?
My last sentence was you guys wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. New York and DC have also followed suit recently.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Ms. Torrent, Karen Torrent.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and delegates. My name is Karen Torrent, and I am the Policy Counsel for the National Whistleblower Center. NWC is a nonprofit advocacy center that's dedicated to representing whistleblowers and winning policies to protect and reward them, and has been in existence for decades. I'm here this afternoon to offer support for the passage of HB 804 by the committee. I also want to congratulate Delegate Palkovich-Carr and her staff for their extraordinary efforts in putting this bill together. Because of the significance that Maryland has played in the history of this country from its inception to the Civil War, I thought it would be useful to draw upon history to provide context for why HB 804 is needed today. During the Civil War, the first government contractors were selling fraudulent equipment in the form of muskets filled with sawdust, decrepit horses, and shoddy constructed shoes to the Union. President Lincoln and his supporters in Congress recognized that whistleblowers are often the ones who are the best sources of information as to fraud, waste, and abuse, and passed the False Claims Act in 1863. Lincoln's whistleblower law provided individuals with cash incentive to report fraud against the Union, which is one of the most essential elements for a successful whistleblower program. In addition to awards, the other elements are confidentiality and protection of the identity of the whistleblower, protection of the whistleblower from retribution, recovery of damages that occur from any such retribution, and the ability of the whistleblower to appeal to courts. HB 804 has all of these elements. I want to stress confidentiality because that to me goes to the heart of whistleblower protections. Individuals that we have represented or have talked to who are whistleblowers and who have come forward do so at a risk to their livelihoods and sometimes their own personal safety. And this includes all sorts, they run the gamut. But one of the main reasons they come forward is not because of the rewards. I mean, that's just not worth it. Why they come forward is because they want to do the right thing. And even though in this case, we're not talking about faulty muskets or lame horses, the principles behind the adoption of the first whistleblower law are equally applicable in the context of fraud. US tax laws and state laws are premised on the integrity and fairness to all of its citizens. In the United States, the tax gap, which is the difference between the amount of taxes owed by the taxpayers and the amount voluntarily paid on time, amounts to billions of dollars. And states and cities lose hundreds of millions of dollars when corporations and people fail to pay their taxes. And these taxes includes not only income taxes, but also sales taxes and other taxes. Tax whistleblowers are individuals who report on the underpayment of the taxes or on the violation of law by others. Tax whistleblowers have assisted in not only preserving the integrity and fairness of our system, but also reducing the tax gaps, which I'm not sure what Maryland's is, but I'm sure you have one. Proceeds collected by the IRS as a result of whistleblower information that was stated previously are a lot of money. They amount to billions of dollars. And just last year in FY 2020, they were $86 million. The National Whistleblower Center looks forward to continuing to work with the committee, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
All right, thank you both very much. Are there any questions for either Mr. White or Ms. Torrent? All right, thank you both very much. We're done with the hearing on House Bill 804. Delegate Chi is still testifying in HGO. They're maybe having 5 million questions on her one bill. So we'll keep moving forward. We'll come back to her 2 bills at the end. Delegate Smith, we have 2 bills from you. Let's start with House Bill 865.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to say also thank you to Vice Chair Washington and hello to all of my colleagues on the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Stephanie Smith, and today I'll be presenting to you House Bill 865, and I hope to gain a favorable report. So this bill is concerning the small commercial program of the historic revitalization tax credit. This is a tax credit that really, encourages private investment and the rehabbing of our more modest Main Street, scale historic structures. The program has been incredibly successful, but unfortunately, as a result of that success, it has reached its initial authorization amount, which was $4 million. It is currently without funding. This legislation would replenish funding for that program, and which is poised to have, ongoing effective aid for our economic recovery that we find ourselves in across the state. Preserving our historic places is not a partisan issue. Each district we represent has its own important story and history, and the historic built environment is worth preserving. House Bill 865 will help safeguard our state's past and invest in our community's futures. What it will do is that it will authorize an amount of historic tax credits that the Maryland Historical Trust can issue to small community projects by $1 million. The program's original authorized limit, as I mentioned, was $4 million, and that has since been exhausted. So one of the things I wanted to point out that wouldn't be reflected in the fiscal note is that the Able Foundation did conduct a recent review of our historic tax credit landscape across the state. And they found for every dollar of tax credits issued through the historic revitalization tax credit, we as a state recouped $8.13 in economic activity. So an increase in this authorization amount for this program by $1 million is anticipated to result in the generation of over $8 million and the creation of new jobs during the construction period. As the General Assembly is remaining focused on economic recovery in the face of COVID-19, it is important to note that historic preservation projects encourages private investment in the revitalization economy, helps generate state and local tax revenue, and increases the property value of the project and surrounding properties. The funding, authorized here would allow the small commercial program of the historic revitalization tax credit to continue to be an effective and powerful community revitalization tool. So I am happy to offer House Bill 865, and I do wish for you to extend a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Smith. Any questions for Delegate Smith? All right, Delegate, thank you. No questions. We'll move on to 4 people signed up to testify, starting with Barton Ross. I see you there trying to unmute. All right, while you're trying to figure that out, we'll come back to you. Reverend John Heath.
Madam Chair, I'm here to support 869, which I believe is the next bill.
Oh, okay. Well, you signed up for 865, but I'll cross you off. Okay. Terrence Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Terrence Moore, and I am testifying in support of House Bill 865. I do so today as a small business owner and a consultant, a realtor, and a co-founder of the Western Maryland Community Development Corporation, which has a focus on revitalization of communities like the historic Jonathan Street community in Washington County, Hagerstown, Maryland. I strongly support this bill as I believe it serves as a resource for entrepreneurs, the preservation of historical communities, and a vehicle to support the economic growth, recovery, and employment of developers, contractors, craftsmen, and designers during historical community rehabs. It is my understanding that every dollar invested in historical revitalization tax credit generates $8.13 in economic activity invested by the state, and every million in credit supplies generates almost 49 jobs during the construction period. I would refer to our Heart of the Civil War Heritage Area Economic Impact Study released in January that measures the economic value of Carroll, Frederick, and Washington County's heritage area at over $450 million as evidence of the potential return on investment for the support of development incentives in historical communities. I believe it will be a valuable resource to our main streets and historical communities where we live, work, and play. And over the last year, we've tried to survive. This bill to replenish the authorization with an additional $1 million for historic tax credits will result in more projects during a time where our economy and our small business owners need it the most, and allow the private sector to aid in the recovery of ultimately returning exponentially more to the state treasury than it costs. The result of these projects may significantly improve local property tax income, increase the property values, and prove to be a cost-effective way to focus investment to disinvested communities like the Jonathan Street community that are plagued by blighted properties, which lack the cost-effective housing and are at risk of seeing their history demolished and erased. So I ask today that you've returned a favorable decision on House Bill 865. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We'll go back to Mr. Barton Ross.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Barton Ross, and I'm a historic architect and small business owner whose practice is focused exclusively on working with older buildings. And I'm here today on behalf of Maryland's statewide chapter of the American Institute of Architects, which represents 2,000 architects across our state. Many of our members, they conduct research, advocate for, and successfully work on historic tax credit projects. When it was established in 2015, this small commercial historic revitalization tax credit received an authorization for up to $4 million in credits. Unfortunately, this initial authorized amount was depleted last summer, but this really speaks to the overall popularity of the program as a tool for community revitalization. This proposed bill would immediately replenish the authorization with a reasonable ask. I live in Chestertown, which is one of the select places in America recognized as a National Historic Landmark, and I serve on my local Main Street Design Committee. And we found that small businesses overwhelmingly favor historic tax credits for commercial buildings. These unique older structures, accessible to pedestrians, are particularly attractive to entrepreneurs and local owners. And in an era where online shopping has elevated experiential retail to newfound importance, we find that businesses seek buildings with architectural character to stand apart and attract customers to come into their business. So these projects are not inexpensive. They're often undertaken on hundreds of main streets in every county in our state, but they can be a central element for local success if the financing is available. So please invest in Maryland's built environment, economy, and future by increasing the funding for our state historic tax credit program and support HB 0865. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And Nicholas Redding.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and appreciate Delegate Smith's introduction of the bill. My name is Nick Redding. I'm the president and CEO of Preservation Maryland, which is the statewide historic preservation group. And thrilled to be with you here. I know we have a lot of friends on this committee, folks that we've worked with, and a lot of people that I know respect and love history and the history of the state. And we see this as not only an opportunity for us to invest in that, when I think over the past year, we've recognized how valuable our history is to telling the full story of American history, but also this is a Main Street tax credit at the end of the day. That's what this funds. This funds the rehabs of small buildings on main streets all across the community. It can have an impact in pretty much every district represented on this committee. And so these are for projects, to give you a scale, between $5,000 and $500,000 in qualified rehab expenditures. So this is not competing with the large commercial, sort of the mega projects that get a lot of the press. These are, projects that are smaller in scale, may have a residential component to them, may have some type of Main Street retail component to them. But in a time in which Main Street communities are struggling so greatly, being able to retrofit buildings for new use and new commercial activity really is critical. Obviously, it's been fully subscribed. We made some changes with the support of the General Assembly in the past couple of years that really made the program work great. And we are able to do a lot more with the program. There's a lot more interest in it. And we were on a tour last week with some developers from outside of the state who are now looking at Maryland because some of these changes that have been made. So returning a favorable report on this bill is a vote not only in favor of preserving sort of the full story of Maryland history from places like Jonathan Street to Baltimore City to Prince George's County and everywhere in between, but it's also a vote in favor of supporting Main Street communities when they absolutely need it most. And we appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you. And then we next have Louis Bertuca.
Hello, thank you. This is the bill on closing the rental car exemption?
He's for the next bill, Madam Chair.
Okay. Again, he is on this list and not, and he is on the next one, but he was on this one as well. So you signed up for two. All right. Any questions for Mr. Ross, Mr. Moore, Mr. Redding? All right, thank you. Seeing no questions, we're done with the hearing on House Bill 865. We'll move to 869. Delegate Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, good afternoon to all my colleagues on the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Stephanie Smith, and I come before you today to present House Bill 869 and hope to gain your favorable support. This bill does three things. First, it creates sales tax parity for peer-to-peer car sharing companies and traditional car rental companies at 8%. Two, it rescinds a titling tax exemption for car rental company fleet purchases. And lastly, it requires this recouped revenue be sent to the reserve fund for HBCUs created by the Speaker's bill, House Bill 1. Why is this bill needed? Well, we often hear that budgets are moral documents. Less often, we discuss that our system of taxation, the very resources used to produce our budgets, should also be assessed for its commitment to equity and justice. In this specific case, the car rental industry currently applies an 11.5% sales and use tax to their rentals, and that's obviously higher than the 8% peer-to-peer companies charge. However, there are reasons for these different rates. See, nearly 30 years ago, when I was in middle school, the rental car industry made a deal with the Maryland General Assembly that if they were allowed to be exempted from the titling tax on their fleet purchases, they would apply 11.5% sales tax to their consumer transactions to make up the difference. In fact, the legislative history from 1993 includes written testimony that this arrangement would be revenue neutral for Maryland state coffers. Again, revenue neutral. Based on what was known then, this was apparently a fair deal. But it's no longer 1993, it's 2021. And it is clear that the basic rationale for that agreement is no longer valid. I'd like to direct you to the fiscal note. And in that fiscal note, for this bill, it indicates that by rescinding the titling tax exemption and lowering the rental car company sales tax rate to 8%, we still net nearly $60 million a year that we can apply to our state obligations. For me, it is clear that our historically Black colleges and universities, often referred to as HBCUs, have had to literally battle with Democratic and Republican administrations and our very legislature to even begin to receive resources to repair the funding injustices of old. I'm proud that we are beginning that important work. However, if we do not make firm and sustainable commitments to Maryland HBCUs, important engines of social and economic mobility, we may find ourselves 20 years later wondering why we still haven't kept pace with these obligations to adequately and equitably fund these higher education institutions. What this bill isn't about. The market share fate between one emerging sector and another longstanding sector are quite frankly, they're not my concern. The free market will sort that out, and I presume we will have other bills before our committee focus on that type of business positioning. This bill is about making sure we don't stay in a bad deal for Maryland's taxpayers just because private industry enjoys the imbalance. Imagine if the original revenue neutral deal from 1993 had adversely impacted industry's bottom line. They would have wasted no time coming before our body seeking relief and redress. And quite frankly, they would have been well within their rights to do so. In closing, I leave with two questions that I believe fundamentally have the same answer. Are the taxpayers of Maryland any less worthy than a corporation of our legislative reflection? Of course not. Should state HBCUs that have experienced systemic underfunding be asked to wait for a sustainable source of ongoing support when we are literally foregoing revenue in a bad deal to the tune of $60 million a year? Of course not. Thank you for your attention, time, and commitment to common sense tax reform with an eye towards economic justice. I do hope you will help me find a better deal for Maryland's taxpayers and our cherished HBCUs and provide HB 869 with a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Smith. We have a question from Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a couple of questions. I love the last bill, my very good friend Delegate Smith. This one not quite as much. A couple of questions. I'm certainly not an expert. I did a little bit of research. From what I can see, every other state in the country has this some type of excise tax exemption for rental car companies, except for Oregon. Does that sound right? Or
That sounds about right. That sounds about right.
Okay. So, and I, when I say I did the research, I mean, I talked to some people who in my neck of the woods, as I've told you all so many times, I'm sure you know, we're close enough to West Virginia and Pennsylvania to jog there. We don't need a rental car. The people who own rental car businesses, Enterprise, Budget, Hertz in my county have said, if you do this, we are moving. No ifs, ands, or buts. We will relocate a few miles away to West Virginia predominantly. That's where our airport is, by the way, where they rent cars. Our Cumberland's airport is actually in West Virginia because of the topography. And they're moving. They're like, we're gone tomorrow. We can't afford this. Given that none of the states around us are talking about removing this excise tax exemption, doesn't that cause you concerns as to, again, we become completely anti-competitive with our neighbors because we're doing something that no one else is doing from a tax standpoint?
I appreciate that question, Delegate Buckle, and I did know that you would appreciate my first bill for the great deal it was for Maryland taxpayers.
Yes.
I think if you just come along with me on this mental journey, I believe I'm still advocating for the best deal for Maryland taxpayers, because at the end of the day, the extension of this exemption to this industry was negotiated by them to say, hey, we'll take a higher sales tax. And for that, that outcome would be revenue neutral. I appreciate your question, but this is about an agreement that was made with this legislature to not adversely impact our bottom line. And we agreed to it based on the merits of that set of circumstances. Those circumstances have changed. I am firmly in strong belief that if this was on the other foot, they would have sought redress in 1995, 1998, 2011, whenever it emerged. We have waited the majority of my life to do right by the Maryland taxpayers in this arrangement. And I recommend that we take that opportunity to do so and redirect it to all of the obligations that we have neglected over that same amount of time.
Thank you. So when you talk about we made a deal, you said it was when you were in middle school. That probably means when I was in
don't tell on yourself.
High school,
It's
maybe.
okay.
I'm not sure.
It's okay.
I'm pretty positive our esteemed leader who, got elected to this body, I'm sure when she was 17, Madam Chair, I'm sure she wasn't even in the legislature at the time. So, we talk a lot about a deal was made, I practice law for a living. There are no deals. It's something that happened 25 years ago or so from legislators who, for the most part, probably aren't even alive. And lobbyists probably who aren't even
The
alive.
lobbyist who wrote it is alive and will probably be talking to you later. So I think he might.
Okay, well, so some
with
people have
us.
held on. That's wonderful. But I just have a concern about saying that we made a deal, and yet we're always also told there's nothing we can do as a legislature that binds future legislatures. So it's not really a deal. It's just a history of things. Is that fair?
No, actually, I don't think it's fair because, quite frankly, the very industry that made the deal wants another industry that wasn't even conceived at the time to pay the same sales and tax rate because they want parity. I've provided parity to both industries in this bill by reducing the sales tax for the pre-existing industry so that they're both at 8%. See, this is the thing. I want to make sure that in our conversation about this sales and use tax and the titling exemption, that we don't decouple the realities. The only reason why the existing sector agreed to 11.5% was because they were getting another deal. This sector, when people put their cars on a peer-to-peer car sharing website, the people who put those cars up there paid a titling tax. So you can't decouple the expectation for us to have a higher tax rate on the sales and use tax from one industry when they negotiated in that whole reality that they would also get a significant exemption. But I still take issue with we agreed to it under the presumption based by them. This would be revenue neutral. And I don't see how we can, I'm not even good at math. You and I went to law school because we're not good at math. But last fact,
in part.
$60 million on the table every year is the direct opposite of revenue neutral.
Okay, so I don't want to filibuster and go on, but when we talk about money's going to be assigned, you're talking about assigning this massive excise tax, essentially, that's rated of up to $85 million in new revenues by fiscal year 2023 in
Yes,
new
sir.
taxes that would be imposed on essentially one industry. And the net effect of this, according to the fiscal note, once we get to fiscal year 2023, is about $72 million of more money, more tax money. And you want to assign all of that to the HBCU fund. Is that correct?
Yes, that was my intent at, the drafting of this legislation. I do see that it impacts highway, I think it's on transportation trust funds. In the first fiscal year, there's an infusion of about $76 million to the transportation trust fund. And then there's some decreases moving forward. But again, I'm willing to hold the Transportation Trust Fund. I believe the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Trust Fund, harmless. Even if we kept them whole through this whole time period, we would still come out ahead for HBCUs. So I'm just going to be on the line saying, hey, you can do that, and you're still giving HBCUs an ongoing sustainable source of support above what they would generally be appropriated as a higher education institution.
All right, let's move on to the next set of questioners. I think you guys will have to have a longer conversation, it seems, on this bill. Delegate Lukey?
Just a quick clarification, Delegate, and I appreciate your passion. You said a second ago that the peer-to-peer car sharing websites were not eligible for the credit you're trying to eliminate here. But isn't it true that the way the law is drawn, anybody who purchases 5 or more vehicles for rental, including people who rent those cars through a platform like Turo, are eligible for the credit?
Absolutely, Delegate. If they have a certain, like you said, if they meet the purchasing threshold. Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
So they are eligible. I mean, it's applied to both.
No, I think there's a completely different business model. One does not just buy one car. I mean, the rental car companies own fleets. We all are fully aware of that. What we're describing with the peer-to-peer car sharing model, and for those, particularly those who are new to the committee and didn't hear similar, testimony last time, I think an easy way to describe it is kind of like an Airbnb or something like for your car. Let's say many of us have more than one car. If we're not driving our car and we want to make some additional revenue, some additional money, then by all means we can list our car on a website, get someone to rent it, but we more than likely paid a titling tax to buy that. Now I'll tell you what, I know the direction you're going with this. If we want to have a bill that remedies those that have more than 5 cars and still use these types of peer-to-peer sharing websites, let's have that bill and let's have that bill hearing. But this bill hearing is really about the fact that we extend a titling exemption to an industry under the presumption that it would be a revenue neutral opportunity. That is not the fact.
Appreciate it, Delegate. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Thank you both very much. We'll move on to those in favor. Use my discretion to not take someone from the top of the list and go first to former Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake testifying in favor of it.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Ways and Means Committee. I am Stephanie Rawlings Blake, here at the request of Delegate Stephanie Smith to testify in support of HB 869. It is my honor to testify on this side of the street in the House, where my father served for 24 years. Even though I did not know with Delegate Smith's testimony, I would feel so old at the end of it, but where he fought so hard fighting for equality in education. When I saw this bill, I could almost hear his voice telling me that this is a great bill. It's a great bill that my father, a proud Morgan State alum, would love for its boldness and for its fairness. Bold because it challenges a 25-year tax exemption by simply requiring a corporate citizen to pay its taxes like all citizens. And fair because it seeks to fund the judicially confirmed underfunded HBCUs of our state. And let me be clear, I have no concern for the industries of peer-to-peer car sharing or rental cars. They're businesses who have the privilege of earning money in our state, and I know the market will sort out their differences. I am sure the executives' bonuses are not in jeopardy. And I know that requiring a company to pay its taxes will not drive the state or drive them from the state or doom their businesses. So I support this bill because the sponsor seeks to close a corporate tax exemption in an effort to provide a funding stream to HBCUs and more importantly, to the students that they serve. This is disruptive to the status quo of tax exemptions for corporations that earn billions, while Black students and their universities struggle to have an 8-year court order honored by the state. This bill puts HBCU students at the front of the line after years of relegating them to tax. Money for HBCUs is not the issue. It's right. It's right there in the fiscal note. Prioritization is the issue. So we have the money, we just need to make them the priority. As others have said, review of this legislative history makes it clear that the state has not received the benefit of their original bargain. This is not the car rental industry's fault. Their sole job is to turn a profit, and they have. However, the question to you is, as legislators, is how long should the state be a part of a deal that has failed to deliver on its original promise? And as mayor of Baltimore, I learned that if I bowed to corporate status quo, Baltimore would continue to be denied public school construction dollars. So we imposed a tax on the beverage containers, rejected illogical corporate excuses, and leveraged the new revenue to pass, with your help, the Baltimore City School Construction and Revitalization Act, obtaining over $1 billion in revenue bonds to implement the city school system's 10-year facilities plan. Delegate Smith, I'm proud of you for putting action in the place of platitudes. And trust me, as a retired elected official, no one leaves office at the end of their career wishing that they had preserved one more corporate loophole. I urge you, members of this committee, to heed the call of Speaker Jones and show the courage to right the wrongs of the past. This bill demonstrates the creative thinking that is needed to break the barriers and achieve social justice. So I urge you, your favorable report of HB 869. And thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. DePietro, Chris DePietro.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Chris DePietro. I'm here on behalf of Tura, which is a peer-to-peer car sharing platform. I think Delegate Smith could not have set up this issue any better than she did. I mean, in fact, a lot of my testimony has already been covered by the ground that she laid, but I'm going to dive into it a little bit more deeply into the history. We provided the committee a one-pager on the history of the rental car titling tax. You have to go back to 1981 when this started. In 1981, the car rental industry asked the General Assembly at the time, hey, if you give us a tax break or a tax credit on titling tax paid, so they were paying it back then, we'll be willing to pay a higher transactional rate. And so the transaction rate went from 5 to 8%. And in the fiscal note for the next bill in 1993 states, referring to the prior bill, this change was intended to be revenue neutral to the state while encouraging rental companies to purchase and register vehicles in Maryland. So it was very clear what the intent was of that first bill. And the second bill in 1993, 12 years later, built off of that. So what it did is it was actually the whole game. The full excise tax was exempted for the car rental industry in that year. And what happened is that the transaction rate went from 8% to 10%. And meanwhile, the sales and use tax in the state at the time was still 5%. So that was clearly the trade. And again, it was intended to be revenue neutral. And even in the testimony that was given by the car rental coalition, the coalition was formed in an effort to review the impact of the state's taxes on the rental car industry and to search for a revision to the tax structure that would not only benefit industry, but maintain sufficient revenues for the state. So they were trying to hold the state harmless. And that was the policy that the General Assembly in 1993 accepted. And that's fine. We're not judging them for what happened back then. That was a decision they made back then. Fast forward to today, 3 years in 2018, Maryland was on the forefront of creating a new statutory framework for this new peer-to-peer car rental car industry separate from the traditional car rental industry. So we passed that. And back in the 1990s, the Maryland General Assembly could not have envisioned anything like this. So it hasn't been looked at in all those years. Because of this new inventive way of doing business, we're now forced to take a look back, and the General Assembly has this bill, and we support the goals of the bill. We support the fact that the monies are going to be administered.
Mr. DePietro, your time has expired.
Thank you. I request a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Louis Bertuca.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Really appreciate it, the time to talk today. My name is Louis Bertuca. I am from Truro. I'm actually the son of a Baltimore Colt. So I've spent a lot of time in Maryland and the Baltimore area. I just want to talk about 1993 and the deal that was struck, because around the country, Delegate Lukey is right, these exemptions do exist. But they exist because Enterprise Rental Car went to the state legislatures and got these exemptions because they couldn't apply for a sale for resale exemption the way that they actually do business, because they're utilizing the car. And the reason that they do not get this in the state of Oregon, this exemption in the state of Oregon, is because the state of Oregon did not have any tax associated with buying cars for the longest time. When they implemented it, Enterprise had not gotten around to doing a 1993 style compromise with the state of Oregon. So the state of Oregon's highest tax court, the Oregon State Appellate Court of Taxation, in August of 2020, just last August, said, no, you guys are utilizing these vehicles. You're using them. You're extracting value. We're going to lose too much money by allowing you to use a sale for resale exemption that is for car retailers. So they got pushed back on that. Around the country, from Massachusetts to Texas, these bills have now been exposed. Enterprise has exposed the fact that these exemptions exist by attacking peer-to-peer car sharing. So these exemptions are going to go away eventually once the states realize all the money that they're losing. The state of Maryland lost $65 million this year. Don't take it from us. We underestimated it. Our fact sheet says 50 million. The fiscal note on this bill says 65 million. They lost 65 million this year. They're going to lose $65 million next year. I will say this. No rental car company has left the state of Oregon. No rental car company is trying to arbitrage the state of Oregon to get cars from the neighboring states to come in. I got a new visitor here. No rental car company is doing that. So they need to get those cars titled in Maryland, and they should pay the same tax that our hosts pay when they get their car titled in Maryland. Where else in law do laundromats, when they buy washing machines and dryers in the state of Maryland, do they say, oh, somebody's using our stuff, so we don't have to pay taxes when we purchase those? No, they pay taxes when they purchase those items in the state of Maryland. So we've been yelling about this for a long time because of, quite frankly, the pressure that the rental car industry has put on our hosts, the citizens of Maryland. But I think look no further than this bill. Do not let them try to misdirect. That's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to say, no, look over here, or look here, or they'll say I'm not the loving son of a loving mother and my company's terrible, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, this is about an exemption and a deal and a bargain that Maryland got the short end of the stick on. And it's time to finally redirect that money to a worthy cause, a very worthy cause. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Gaston Kelly.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor of House Bill 869. Thank you to Delegate Smith for sponsoring the bill. My name is Gaston Kelly. I'm the Public Policy Manager for GetAround, a connected and contactless car sharing marketplace. At GetAround, we use technology, a device called the GetAround Connect, installed in the car and a smartphone app to power a marketplace that can help people share the car with others nearby without ever having to meet up to exchange keys. Though we are not yet operating in Maryland, we certainly hope to be very soon. Our platform helps car owners monetize the expensive asset. On average, it's idle 22 hours a day. And that extra money can mean a lot, especially at times like these. Of course, not everybody can afford a vehicle or even aspires to own one. And that's okay. Through our platform, folks can get access to a car that they need when they need it for only a few bucks by the hour or the day. Our technology is compatible with over 3,000 makes and models. These are vehicles that are already on our streets. We simply connect people who own cars with people who need access to one. Where we operate, car sharing quickly becomes an important piece of the transportation option puzzle. When citizens are empowered to share their cars, transportation deserts can disappear overnight, replaced by a locally sourced option. This is important. 90% of the people that use our platform are local people making local trips. These are errands, going to an appointment, just getting a car for a few hours to do the critical, essential tasks that are required. Car sharing also has environmental benefits. Studies show that one car that is shared can take 10 others off the road, means fewer accidents, reduced traffic, and cleaner air. We support House Bill 869 because it creates true parity between peer-to-peer car sharing and rental car companies when it comes to taxation. The bill makes it so both owners that share their cars and rental car companies pay the same sales tax on purchase. Transactions are then taxed at the same rate. I'm not here to make a case that rental cars are bad. I simply want to communicate that peer-to-peer car sharing is also good and should be treated in a way that is fair so that Maryland residents can benefit from both offerings for years to come. Thank you for your time, and I ask for a favorable report of House Bill 869.
I'll call on Reverend Heath and then pass things back to the Vice Chair.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Love to see that little one and love family. Thank you, Vice Chair Washington, members of the committee. I'm Pastor John A. Heath, and I'm testifying in support of HB 869. Most of you are part of the newer wave to the legislature, but this inequitable funding for HBCUs in Maryland has been a decades-old fight. As a former pastor in Maryland, as a former chief of staff in both the House of Delegates and Senate, former senior advisor to the governor, and former special assistant to the president and director of government relations at Coppin State College, where I was able, along with colleagues, to secure $600 million in capital funding to address just a crumbling physical plant there. I've been in this fight since the 90s, so I guess I'll date myself in this testimony. For years, system leaders, members of the legislature, former governors would talk about where to find the money. I never understood at the time why the former president of Morgan, Dr. Earl Richardson, would be so vociferous in his fight to secure funding until I really got to see behind the scenes with budget. And certainly Mayor Rawlings Blake, her dear father, who was an adopted mentor of mine, was a great champion for Morgan, but everybody didn't have a Pete Rawlings, such as schools like Coppin. And so this bill submitted by this rising star and fantastic Delegate Smith, and the companion bill by my dear friend in the Senate side provide a solution of where we get that funding. The rental car industry and enterprise in particular has a heinous history of discriminating against Black customers and Black employees throughout the U.S. and unfortunately in the state of Maryland. $16.3 million in judgments in 2019. Closing this tax loophole would bring, in some estimates, 60 million, I've heard as high as nearly 80 million to the budgets of HBCUs in Maryland. If you go back to 1993, when the loophole was created, that's $1 billion in revenue. This is not about an industry fight. This is about a justice that the company that discriminates against Black people would be able to now contribute to HBCU equity. I close with the words of the late Elijah Cummings, former president pro tem. I only have a minute, 60 seconds in it, forced upon me. I did not choose it. Give account if I abuse it, suffer if I lose it. Only a tiny little minute is in it. Please make the most of your minute and support HBCU equity. Thank you. I urge a favorable report.
Thank you. Any questions? We're going to take Delegate Lukey first.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I love all the testimony in support of our HBCUs, and that's fantastic. I have a question, Mr. DePietro, for you. If instead of what this bill proposes, we were just to increase the sales tax for everybody up to 11.5% and dedicate that money to HBCUs. Would you support that bill?
No, because it doesn't address the core
No,
issue.
you wouldn't.
I would not
So
support
just
that bill.
to be clear, the issue that Turo has nothing to do with the HBCUs. This is a fight between industry players. Can I ask you this? How many full-time employees does Turo have in the state of Maryland?
Turo does not have, that's not the model. And I know that's always the question that's asked.
How many?
We do not have full-time employees.
So no full-time employees.
We have owners
How much
of
in
the
property,
state
Mr.
tax.
DePietro?
Hold on.
How much in property taxes?
Delegate Lukey asked the question, let him answer. Go ahead. Delegate Lukey, ask your question.
How much in property taxes does Turo pay in the
They
state of
don't
Maryland?
pay property tax in Maryland.
How much
They
in
pay
corporate
property in
income
Maryland?
taxes? How much in corporate income taxes does Turo pay in the state of Maryland?
That I do not know the answer to.
Mr. Bertuca, do you know?
I do not know the answer to that, but I do have an answer to your earlier question. So did you ask, and I'm sorry, this is a little choppy with the Wi-Fi. You asked if we would accept 11.5%.
If the goal is to increase funding for HBCUs, an alternative way to do it would be to set the sales tax rate at 11.5%. That would bring in additional revenue. And Mr. Preacher said that you all would oppose that.
If you looked at the fiscal note on this bill, you would see that the only real revenue in this bill is hiding in the exemption, the $65 million. But if you were to close the exemption completely and dedicate that money to HBCUs, we will pay the exact same thing as rental car companies because
no, that wasn't, Mr. Bertuca, that wasn't my question. That wasn't my question. What I'm trying to draw out, and I think that it's important for the committee to understand, these are two separate issues. There is no denying that HBCUs in this state have been discriminated against and historically underfunded. No denying it. And the Speaker of the House has fought harder than anybody to make sure the HBCUs got funded. And I commend Delegate Smith for trying to make sure the HBCUs got the funding they deserve. But you're not here because you care about HBCUs. You're here because this is a tax fight between industry players.
Delegate, if I could just respond.
Let me ask this, and then you can respond as much as you want. Let me ask this. Why did Turo not accept the multiple deals that were offered to you over the last 9 months to try to resolve this situation and then for this bill?
Well, because I don't know specifically what deals you're talking about that were offered to us, but let me just get back to the HBCU question. We brought the issue of parity and fairness, eliminating the loophole closure, doing that, and having parity on the tax for the transaction. That's the issue we brought forward. Legislative leaders that I brought this issue to made the suggestion for HBC to have the money go to HBCU funding. So we're not using that as a ploy. It's a real issue. We did not come to it and said, oh, this is cute, let's do this. That was not, and I don't want to be insinuated in doing something like that. So I just want to set the record straight there for the committee.
Mr. DePietro, I had a conversation with one of the lobbyists for Turo who told me this bill was coming and it was being used as a weapon against enterprise and they were going to target the HBCUs.
Not true. I'll put my money where my mouth is.
Hey, let me chime in here. First, we're not gonna make any accusations here about anyone or any.
Mr. Chair, can I make a clarification?
Wait. No, and I mean, by the way,
excuse me, if everybody can stop right now, we're gonna move on to the next question. That is.
I brought this thing home. Everyone listen to the vice chair. You cannot all speak at once. You were not recognized, Delegate Smith, Delegate Lutke, everyone else, and all the witnesses. Delegate Washington is in charge. Please, one person at a time.
And we're gonna move on to the next question. Delegate Felmark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question was actually for Mayor Rawlings Blake, if she's still here. I see her camera's off. I'm not sure if she stepped away. I think she's okay. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I appreciated your testimony. And I really just wanted to ask for your perspective, as a former elected official and mayor of Baltimore. We've heard some discussion about the idea of this being a deal that was reached, and I think we all recognize that as legislators, we pass legislation. We don't sign contracts, right? But there are certainly negotiations and agreements that get reached in passing legislation. So I just wanted to know, sort of in your opinion or from your perspective, do you have concerns about changing a deal that was not delivering what Maryland expected? Do you have any?
Yeah, I don't have any concerns. We had to do that multiple times in Baltimore when we had to look at things like the rate that we were charging for our conduit rental. So many times when you took a look at fees that were charged, agreements were made, decades before, and nobody paid attention to it. And then when we looked at, reviewed all of the fees and taxes, we were noticing, hey, this is out of line with, what's going on in surrounding jurisdictions. This is out of line with the national trends. And we adjusted it because we were taking advantage of that revenue. The industry said it would be revenue neutral. The fact that they have had have tens of millions of dollars, if not more, have benefited from this tax exemption when they said it would be revenue neutral. At no time did they say, hey, wait a minute. We said it would be, tax exempt, but we want, we're making tens of millions of dollars extra every year. We're going to give this back to you. Didn't say it at all. So I don't understand why, we wouldn't be fighting as hard as we could to get this money, to dedicate it to HBCUs that are seriously underfunded, to make that dedication instead of fighting so hard for these corporations who aren't going anywhere. I had to deal with it with the National Beverage Association. They say they're going to go anywhere. If you do anything to change any tax, whatever, it's going to be the death of them. They're all still here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Delegate Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for the sponsor of the bill. The purpose of you putting in the bill is to level the playing field for peer-to-peer. It just so happens that you want to tie in the additional revenue to our 4 HBCUs. Is that correct?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't really care about either of these companies. I want to make sure that we are not stuck in a bad deal anymore. And I see that there's revenue tied to a bad deal. And I'm like, you know what? This bill should be the beginning of us re-examining all the types of exemptions that we just have been resting upon for decades without a look back to see what are we leaving on the table. So to me, it's not really about, if bringing sales tax parity will provide some level of comfort to these industries, God bless them. But I want fairness for Maryland taxpayers, and that's why I brought the bill.
No, I understand. I just wanted to make sure that I was clear that your goal is to set parity. It just so happens that you found a mechanism to provide additional funding for our 4 HBCUs.
Correct.
Right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Wilkins with our last question for the sponsor of the bill and the folks who have spoken already.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is also for the bill sponsor. It sounded like you had a technical clarification, and just for the purposes of making sure we're understanding the hearing, I wanted to see what that clarification was.
Thank you, Delegate Wilkins. Yeah, I just want to make it clear that I brought forth the bill not because I really care about any of these businesses. I'll be honest. I regularly actually rent cars from budget because we're a 1-car household in my family and we don't feel like having an ongoing, car payment. I have actually never even used a peer-to-peer sharing platform. I go to budget in Canton like every 2 months. But the reason why I'm here is because I just feel that there's money on the table. We need to examine it. And quite frankly, when this proposal was presented to me, I unilaterally of my own accord said, I think the best thing to do is to ensure that we always have a sustainable resource to fund our HBCUs. And that's the direction I went with this bill. But I'm hoping this bill is not seen as me making a decision about who wins and loses in this particular, business food fight. Because again, I said in my testimony, the market will make that decision for all of them.
Thank you. Let's go to our next speakers who are unfavorable on the bill. Michael De Lorenzo. Okay.
Hello?
Oh, there you go. Okay.
I'm unmuted, so I gave in some written testimony. If anyone can look at it, I have 2 points, actually 4, but I won't have time to make. The first point I want to make is I gave a spreadsheet that shows how the taxes flow on the average cars purchased in Maryland last year. If you look at my spreadsheet, line 16, column E in the center, it shows $445. And what that's showing you is that the average new car in Maryland in 2020, purchased by the citizens of Maryland, they paid $2,225 in tax. That person most likely is going to keep that car for 5 years. And if you amortize that $2,225 over 5 years, they're paying $445 a year in tax. Going right to column H, the used car buyers are paying $142 a year in excise tax. The blended average car purchased in Maryland in 2020 is paying $236 per car per year in excise tax. Now let's go to the next line. Line 19 is showing the car rental taxation. Whole different way it's calculated. So the average rental car generates $12,372 per year in revenue, and the average rental car pays $1,423 per car per year in tax. So when you compare this to the new car buyers, it's 3 times more than the average new car taxation in Maryland. And it's 6 times more than the average blended car purchased in Maryland. So the concept that we're not paying our fair share just isn't true. I was there at this when these bills were taxed that everyone's talking about revenue neutral. I was part of the Car Rental Coalition. I worked very closely with the chairman of Budget and Tax, Larry Levitan, back in the day. It took 6 years to get this legislation passed. I worked very closely with the vice chair, which was Bill Amos. He was kind of like the guy that showed me around, and it was $20 million that was revenue neutral. So all this talk about revenue neutral was because we were required to come up with $20 million in total taxation to be revenue neutral. And we did when we proposed the 11%. We didn't come to the legislature to propose a tax deal. They repealed the tax and tax credit system because they were in trouble and needed to increase money for the budget, and took away our tax credit and almost put me out of business.
Mr. De Lorenzo, your time has expired. Can you give us your final thought, please?
I run a company in Maryland for Marylanders. I've been in business in Maryland for 52 years. I have 120 employees, and this would kill my business if you guys raise this much tax on my business. It would
Thank you, sir.
Thank
you, sir. We're gonna go to our next speaker, Andy Duff.
Yeah, good afternoon, Madam Chair and little Madam Chair who's with you. Appreciate everybody being here. My name is Andy Dolliff. I'm the Vice President and General Manager of Enterprise Holdings. We run Alamo Enterprise and National Car Rental throughout the state of Maryland, as well as at BWI Airport. It is disheartening to me a little bit that this bill was said to be put in with somebody that doesn't necessarily care about our businesses. That's a little upsetting to me. Because we try to do everything we can in the state of Maryland and try to be a good corporate citizen, which I think is truly every business's responsibility. And I'll just highlight a few of those things first. First, we're headquartered in Linthicum, Maryland. We employ 1,800 Marylanders in the state. If you look at the deck, we pay $91 million. We have a payroll of $91 million. We have $167 million in direct activity in the state and $197 million in indirect activity. So we feel like we're a good Maryland business. We feel like we support the community. To touch upon HBCUs, we are also very proud of our work with the HBCU community. In the last 5 years, we've donated $63,000 to HBCUs. As a company, we've given $1.5 million to HBCUs. And I believe that's the right and the role of a good corporation, is to give back to your community. And that's what we've been doing. We currently employ 106 HBCU employees. Okay. Over the last 2 years, we have attended multiple Morgan State, Coppin State. We sit with their students. We work on resume writing, career readiness, job preparation, mock interviews. We judge their sales competition. We do a lot for the HBCU community. And I am disappointed with Pastor Heath's comments about our heinous activity and discrimination. It's simply not true. So I'm disappointed with those comments as well. As it relates to Oregon, just to clarify, there is no state tax in Oregon. Maryland, they do not have an Oregon state tax. That's a pretty important distinction. And the excise tax is 0.5% on a use tax. That's another piece that was left out of the Oregon puzzle. In Maryland, we pay the highest state tax in the United States of America at 11.5% for car rental, which funds the transportation fund, which is needed for the roads and the infrastructure of Maryland. That's the system that we pay in. To think that we could have that large of a fiscal note and not decimate the car rental industry is simply unfounded. Okay? When you look at a closed market system like where we operate at BWI, every car rental company pays the same busing fees, the same transportation fees, the same concession fees to the airport. Everything is a closed market at BWI. And peer-to-peer operators have been operating there without paying those fees. They haven't been paying concession fees for years. They've been coming on because the airport can't make an agreement with them. They're coming on and doing car rental activity without an agreement. And that is simply wrong in a closed market system where everybody pays the same fees and taxes. So our opposition is not about HBCU involvement. And I am really proud of what our company does to support HBCUs. And I would be willing to do even more and work with this committee to help as a good corporate citizen. But repealing an excise tax that is industry-wide, every state, is simply irresponsible to even consider, because you will decimate the car rental industry and the note will not be the same as you think it will be, because you're taking a shrinking pool. It won't be there. So I appreciate the time today, appreciate the consideration, and we vehemently oppose this thought process that's being discussed today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Rob Gaugioler.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. Rob Garagiola with Compass Government Relations on behalf of both Enterprise and Nextcar, which is a Fitz Auto company, locally based company. A lot was said on a lot of sides here, and I've really 2 points that I'd like to emphasize. Regarding the HBCU, I think there can certainly be a discussion about where tax revenues go with both peer-to-peer and the rental car industry, and I think that's a fair discussion. With respect to the excise tax, I think you heard reasons why repealing that would essentially make Maryland the only state to do such a thing. What has occurred over the years, and many of you I know have been subjected to these debates before your committee previously, is trying to get to a point of parity between a new entrant to the market, relatively new, that's doing very well in the car sharing industry, and the rental car industry, which is providing thousands of jobs in the state of Maryland. 3 years ago, we created in Maryland law a model where both industries are regulated the same, the insurance requirements are the same, essentially all aspects of these two industries. If you're flying in from Oklahoma to BWI and you use your phone to get Turo or Get Around or Enterprise, it's all the same aspect of how you do that. But today, if you fly into BWI, the Oklahoma consumer is going to there's an unfair advantage with peer-to-peer in that there's a lower sales tax and they're not paying the concession fees that Andy talked about earlier. So we're happy that there's discussion about getting to parity with respect to this bill. But what I would argue is the way to get there is to have the same consumer sales tax that's paid by the traveler from out of state or the Marylander who's using a rental car at the 11.5%. There's a means to provide the person who wants to just share their one car with a vendor tax credit to equalize things. The peer-to-peer operator, the driver, They can deduct mileage and other things and other business expenses, or if they create a home office, they can deduct those business expenses. So there's parity there. And so what bottom line is, if you want to get to parity, it should be 11.5% across the board, 5 or more vehicles for peer-to-peer, and would urge the committee to oppose this legislation.
Thank you. Michael Johansson, our last speaker on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Mike Johansson on behalf of Enterprise Rent-A-Car. There's 2 tax pieces to this bill. The customer-facing sales tax, and in this bill, they do the right thing. Everybody pays exactly the same. Whether it's 11.5%, 8%, that's a decision for the General Assembly. But every single customer who rents a car or who uses a car share pay exactly the same. They got that right. With respect to the excise tax, the repeal of what they call the exemption from excise tax, and the discussion of the history back into the 80s and 90s, the representatives of Turo and Get Around have no idea what they're talking about. None whatsoever. That is a tax that every business that has inventory that is used for resale, and in this case, that includes rental, doesn't pay a tax when they purchase the goods. This General Assembly has often made the right choice with respect to the sales tax side. Airbnb sounds a lot similar to what they call peer-to-peer car sharing. If you rent a room in your house, the General Assembly correctly said that the customer who pays for that room pays the 6% or whatever local hotel motel tax there is at the same rate that you pay, that the hotel pays. Did anyone from the General Assembly ever say, well, boy, that homeowner may have a different tax burden than the hotel. We've got to make sure that the customer pays a different rate, or we've got to change some exemption. It never happened. The second area that the General Assembly correctly handled, and it has benefited this state tremendously during COVID with the shutdown, is you taxed out-of-state sales. When you taxed out-of-state sales, what tax rate did you use for the customer? 6%. The same tax rate that your Maryland business would be selling those same goods and services. And at any time during that discussion, did someone say, if I'm buying a product from Pennsylvania, I've got to adjust the Maryland business's tax rate to make sure of their business taxes, it's the same as that. It's the most ludicrous conversation I've ever heard, and it just misses the point completely on what the rental car titling tax exemption is all about. I'll offer this. The other thing that they haven't raised because they don't understand it is it's not an $85 million issue. It's actually a lot less. That's a good thing. That exemption isn't what it used to be because they ignore the fact that the trade difference is now eligible for both common citizens who want to buy a car and every business that would buy a car and pay titling tax on it. So they honestly just simply don't have any idea why the exemption exists. They don't have an idea on what the implications would be if it were repealed. We oppose the bill. We would ask you to really consider the complexities of these 2 tax issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Delegate Wilkins with our first question for this group of speakers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the panel for outlining this side of the conversation. My question is for Mr. Dollop. I heard you express a lot of disappointment and also outline some of the charity and benefits that Enterprise has brought to the state. And though that is appreciated, our state can't run on charity donations, and HBCUs also can't run on charity. They need actual dedicated funding. And so my question, especially in you calling out the good pastor for his comments, is that I think corporate responsibility is very important, and there's a context here in terms of the HBCU funding. Is it not true or inaccurate? Because it sounds like that's what you were saying. Is it not true that there was a $6 million settlement in Baltimore from Enterprise for discrimination against Black employees, at least 2 of them being HBCU grads? And so my question on the bill is, do you see any justice in this legislation that provides that dedicated funding to our HBCUs?
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate the question. No, there was not a settlement made. There has been an accusation and a lawsuit against us that was in the papers, but we have not settled that case, and we oppose and object to what is being said in that lawsuit and have not been found guilty of that yet. So we're going through that process right now. That was something back in 2006, and it revolved around hiring practices. And at the time we had a 44% MSA of hiring African Americans. So we're really proud of what our hiring record is in respects to that. So I think our state tax, look, if they want to move some of the transportation fund money to a different bucket, so to speak, that's not really Enterprise's business or concern. Our business or concern is being on a level playing field and being able to run our business successfully.
Thank you. The quick follow-up is that I'm reading 2019 that a federal judge ordered this amount. So I guess we can just follow up offline. My information maybe is incorrect, but I'm reading a Baltimore Sun article that says this from 2019. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Delegate Feldmark, I think it was, right? Did you ask the question first, or was that the?
I believe Delegate Palakovich-Carr's hand
Okay,
was up
sorry,
first.
Delegate Palakovich-Carr. Go ahead.
And I would have been happy to defer to my colleague, but thank you, Mr. Chair. So actually a question for Mr. Johansson. Something that you said in your testimony piqued my interest. So you mentioned about with the excise taxes that, you know, this isn't just specific to rental car companies, that there would be other businesses or sectors that, you know, hold a good and then resell it and are exempt from the excise tax. Can you give me some other examples of other, you know, types of businesses in Maryland that would get that same kind of exemption?
Good question. Virtually every business that takes goods, uses them as part of what they are reselling for their final product, you don't pay tax when you buy those products. So for example, a manufacturer who uses equipment and then resells, the cost when you buy those products from the previous producer or supplier, you don't pay sales tax. You don't pay sales tax on inventory that you are reselling. It's the standard practice throughout the United States, and it has certainly been the longstanding practice here in Maryland. And what was decided in the 80s and in the early 90s with respect to rental cars was that the cars that we were buying to be used exclusively, and that's the way it's worded. If you look at the exemption, it says you have to have 5 or more cars used exclusively for the purpose of rental. You would be entitled to the same inventory tax exemption that all other businesses have.
So, okay, I think I'm following you. The piece that I'm just trying to puzzle out is in the examples of other businesses, are they having income from the item that is exempt from the tax, even though they are ultimately reselling it? I get they get the income at the end, but while they hold on to that good, are they also getting income from that piece of equipment in your?
Correct. If you're holding the good for purposes of rental, yes, they have income as it comes in.
Okay.
Right. So because the product we offer for sale is the rental of the vehicle, right? So that is our inventory. That is what's being sold to the public. And yes, that other businesses that have that model do not pay a sales tax when they acquire the good.
All right, next question, Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a couple questions, and first, Mr. Johansson, I think it was you who mentioned sort of a misunderstanding about the $85 million number, and I just wanted to clarify that $85 million number came to us from the Department of Legislative Services based on information from the Department of Budget and Management. That was not a number introduced by the sponsor or the proponent. So I'd actually really appreciate it if you can address it quickly. That's great, or we could follow up offline, because if there is a fundamental misunderstanding of something, I think that's really important to tease out. and get clarified.
Real quick, it was contained in the comptroller's tax expenditure report, or DBM's tax expenditure report. It simply references the time before, about 10 years ago, when the Maryland General Assembly allowed for the trade difference to be applied when you buy a vehicle, or if I bought a vehicle and it were subject to excise tax. I buy a $20,000 car, 3 years later, I sell it for $15,000. When I buy the next $20,000 car, the trade value of the 15,000 gets applied against the 20, and now the 6% tax only applies to 5. Okay, so, and to put it in rental car context, rental cars are typically only held for a year. So you buy a car for $20,000. Let's assume you sell it for 16. The next year I'm buying another car for $20,000. So I would only be paying the 6% tax on the 4,000. Just like a consumer who buys a car once every 5 years still gets the value of the trade difference. They're not paying, when they trade a car in, they're not paying a full 6% of the new car price. And when you do that math, that $85 million, which is based on just prior to when we did the trade difference in Maryland, it would be dramatically different.
Okay. So then the next, I guess there's a couple of different issues here. There's a question around the revenue neutrality of a higher sales tax rate with the exemption, right? And then there's a parity issue with this sort of new business model that has entered the market since that original deal was struck, right? So my question to you is, if we could achieve parity between traditional in the sales tax charged for a traditional car rental model and the peer-to-peer sharing, whatever that number is, if we could achieve parity and achieve revenue neutrality for the sales tax generated by the rental car services to offset the exemption, would that suffice for you?
Well, I think achieving revenue neutrality by raising up to 11.5% and exempting the rental cars from the excise tax is achieved by adding in the calculation of the trade difference. So there's not an $85 million exemption. And we are looking at the amount of rental car taxes, which were 60-some million dollars, I think, and looking at this concept that there's an $85 million exemption. That's not true. The second thing about the exemption, not just the trade difference that would bring that $85 million down, is if the Maryland rental car companies had to pay 6% tax on cars titled in Maryland, we would get back to the days that we were in the 80s and 90s, where we title as many cars as we can in Virginia, in Pennsylvania, everywhere, because Enterprise, for example, has a national fleet of vehicles. So I bet you we'd find a way to title the cars that only cost $12,000 in the state of Maryland at 6%, and every rental car that's 20 or whatever, $1,000, they all happen to have Virginia tags in them. So we would be cost avoiding and investing less money in Maryland in order to avoid the 6% tax that would only apply in the state of Maryland. We would use every mechanism possible to avoid that. So again, the tax expenditure report has a number of $85 million in it. That's because we're conducting rational business behavior and we can actually title those cars in the state of Maryland. If Maryland were the lone state that got rid of this exemption, you wouldn't see the exemption qualifying as that much money, because we just simply wouldn't title cars here if we can get away with it.
Thank you. Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. That's kind of Mr. Johansson, and I guess anyone else, that was sort of part of my question, is there's no requirement. I mean, cars by their very definition move. They move across state lines. I've rented cars all over the place, and I don't think often that the tags on the cars are from the state where I'm renting the car from or driving to. So to your knowledge, I mean, the companies wouldn't have to buy their cars in Maryland, title them in Maryland, tag them in Maryland in order to have a fleet at BWI or in order to have a fleet in Montgomery County. They wouldn't have to do that. Is that fair?
Well, no, to be fair and honest with the committee, there is a rule called proportional registration where we would have to make an effort to proportionally register an appropriate amount of cars for Maryland. So we wouldn't be able to get away with buying 0 cars in the state. But like I said, we would use the math to our advantage, title as few cars in the state as possible, and then also buy perhaps the cheapest cars here. So we can't avoid it completely, but we would avoid it to the extent that we would pay a lot less than $85 million in taxes.
And then my other final question was, I missed a little bit of the testimony here because I was on another bill, but I heard and I looked on my phone about this settlement of claims involving some racial discrimination claims. I don't know who the right person is to answer this. That wasn't against the entire rental car industry. Is that correct? It was a lawsuit that apparently is still ongoing through the appellate process against only one company. It looked like to me. Enterprise Rent-A-Car was the only company involved in that, but yet all of the other rental car companies would pay this, under this bill, would pay this penalty for removing the excise tax exemption, and that money would then flow to the HBCUs somehow tied to those allegations. But none of the other companies were involved in that lawsuit at all, right?
Well, it would, you're right. It would basically put this burden on the other rental car companies in addition. And frankly, why pick the rental car industry to remove the inventory tax? If you want to have a conversation about tax exemptions, which I know the committee has had in the past, in an effort to fund one particular project's HBCUs, as laudable as it is, why are the rental car companies the determined ones to do that? Let's go back to alcohol tax, cigarette tax, digital tax, everything else that you guys consider all the time.
Don't give people any ideas, Mr. Johansson. No
I
more
understand
taxes.
that, but there's a tax exemption analysis that the committee's actually been going through every year. So
Sure.
there's lots of industries that could be providers of this essential funding, not just.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
What I heard was tax them all. It's like, no, I'm joking. Thanks, everybody.
Come on now, don't do that to me, Alonzo.
No, I'm joking. Thank you, everyone. That concludes the public hearing for House Bill, Stephanie Smith, House Bill HB 869. And I just want to remind the committee of our rules here about decorum. And I want to just thank all of our speakers and witnesses who came and spoke in front on for or unfavorable for this bill. Thank you all for being here today. Let's go on to our next bill, Delegate Shi. Which bill would you like to take up first? Delegate Shi, are you there?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. I really appreciate this committee's patience. I was early on with another committee, so I was late. Thank you. Let me start with the TEDCO bill, which is Economic Development Comprehensive Technical Assistance Program, HB 987. Okay, for the record, I am Delegate Lily Chi here to present HB 987. This bill is to establish a comprehensive technical assistance program in TEDCO, the Maryland Technology Development Corporation, to help more of our technology companies reach their potential. As you recall, this committee passed the 2 fantastic small business bills last session supporting innovation companies, including a technical assistance program to help companies qualify for federal small business innovation research grants. TEDCO is already implementing that program with its existing resources. This bill would expand on that to fill the gaps in our support system, so a tech company does not have to be on any particular tracks to get the technical assistance from TEDCO at any stages of their growth. This program will provide tailored technical assistance and connect companies with both public and private resources, including a network of experienced executives who will be on loan to help them build up their capacities and achieve their potential. This pandemic has really shown us just what a tremendous opportunity Maryland has to be a global leader in innovation. So many of our companies are on the forefront of developing tests, vaccines, and cures. This is Maryland's moment and our contribution to the world. But so many of our companies fall to the wayside, and not because they don't have the best ideas or technologies, but because they don't have the business acumen or the network to launch the technologies to market. The program can help these small businesses become successful companies that can ultimately go after venture funding, so they can not only be economically viable, but also use their technologies to benefit all of us. Finally, I'm very proud to see the strong leadership at TEDCO with Mr. Troy Stovall as CEO and his collaboration with the collaboration between TEDCO and the Maryland Tech Council led by Dr. Martin Rosendale. Both of them are here to testify. I really appreciate their own collaboration with each other and their service to our tech community. And with that, I'm going to turn to my witnesses. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for the sponsor of the bill? And I want to remind the committee that we have 3 more bills and 12 speakers on those bills. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll go on to our first speaker on this bill, Troy Stovall.
Greetings. Thank you, Delegate Chi, as always. And as she said, I want to thank Marty Rosenfeld for his just amazing collaboration on this. So I'll be brief. Thank you. Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and all the members of the Ways and Means Committee. Thank you for the consideration of House Bill 987 today. My name, as stated, is Troy Lamel Stovall, and I humbly serve as the fairly new CEO and Executive Director for the Maryland Technology Development Corporation, better known as TEDCO, which is dedicated to the economic growth through the fostering of an inclusive entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystem. TEDCO aims to provide the resources, expertise, and guidance to lead Maryland entrepreneurs to opportunities to successfully access capital markets. As Delegate G mentioned, House Bill 987 will enable TEDCO to broaden our efforts by creating a comprehensive end-to-end advisory support program to prepare entrepreneurs for the next stage of growth and by better preparing entrepreneurs to attract funding. First-time entrepreneurs are often ill-prepared for some of the challenges that face early-stage companies, such as customer discovery, business modeling, pitch deck development, securing intellectual property, building teams, or investor readiness. A comprehensive system of assistance is authorized by the House Bill 987, would complement the continuity of TEDCO's current funding program, providing a corresponding continuum of advisory support to better prepare firms to access capital resources. The House Bill 987 would provide the resources such that TEDCO can assist firms understand their short and long-term capital stack. That's all the capital that a firm needs. The capital stack needs how best to access all of those resources, not just traditional equity and debt, but other types of resources. The program would provide flexible and customized services based on the sector that firm competes in, as well as the funding needs by their specific growth stage. Graduates from TEDCO technical assistance programs will be better positioned to attract all sorts of capital, including equity, debt, and SBIR. As a number of well-positioned early-stage companies, more early-stage capital sources will be attracted to Maryland. It is for these reasons that TEDCO urges a favorable report on House Bill 987. And I know Marty's going to speak, but allow me just, if I may, committee members, to also introduce, we have Jihei Yoon, who serves as the CEO and co-founder of Red Shred. It's an artificial intelligence startup in the BW Tech at UMBC Incubator, which was awarded the first NSF Phase 2 SBIR Industry Partnership Subaward in UMBC's history. They've also worked on other Phase 1 and Phase 2 SBIR awards and have received a MIPS grant, seed funding from TEDCO. She's a long-term active member of TEDCO's Women's CEO Roundtable. Her co-founder has also been active on the AI Roundtable. So after Marty speaks, I think she'll be speaking, Vice Chairman, if that's okay. And I'm also here for answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you. Jahi Yoon is actually signed up to speak on this bill, and they can speak right now.
Hi, this is Jihei Yoon. Thank you so much for letting me speak in favor of HB 987. Just real quick about us. One of the reasons why we started Red Shred was we had to read all of these sort of large documents and try to find nuggets of important information. And we thought, wouldn't it be better if a machine could read for you and help you out and figure out what you need to focus on? And so what we did was we developed AI technology to treat documents as a database, which would then make it a little more straightforward and easier for developers or data scientists to unlock value that out of these documents that are often kind of hidden away in an organization. And the way TEDCO has been instrumental in our development is, unless you're a very early stage company and you're starting up, or you're a venture-backed, private equity-backed company, there's this huge chasm that you're trying to figure out how to navigate. And TEDCO fills that need. And it was great for us because we were able to take advantage of Loaned Executive. And we were able to work with a former CMO of SourceFire who really helped us shape messaging and marketing. We've also reached out to the advisor network, where there are a lot of people of various operating experience and expertise. And we were able to ask questions, which eventually led us to be able to get five SBIRs, phase 1s and phase 2s, that really kind of pushed our technology forward. And then the roundtable, the Women's Executive Roundtable, this is very near and dear to me because it serves in the model of like a Vistage or a peer executive group. And what's important is that oftentimes the problems and the pain points that a startup is going to experience is very different than a large operating corporation. So you're able to rely on that network and get answers from peers who have gone before or that you're still trying to help out. But there's also this important element of developing that community and that ecosystem, which I think is something that Maryland is doing and has, needs to go further on. So with that, I'm in favor of HB 987, TEDCO, and the entrepreneurs that rely on TEDCO as well.
Thank you. We have one more speaker on this bill, Mr. Martin Rosendale.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time this afternoon. I really appreciate it. I'm Marty Rosendale. I'm the CEO of the Maryland Tech Council. We have submitted written testimony in support of HB 987, and I'm here this afternoon to provide my testimony in support of the bill with one proposed amendment, which I will explain in just a second. The Maryland Technology Council is the industry trade association that represents technology and life science companies throughout the state. Fundamentally, our mission is to help our members succeed and build industries in Maryland, build the industries in Maryland. You heard Troy talk about access to capital and the capital markets and the capital stack, which is a phrase that he uses, which I think is a great description of the companies, their capital structure and what they're facing. If you've seen some of my previous testimony on other bills, no doubt you've heard me say more than once that access to capital is one of the most significant challenges that our early to mid-stage companies face in Maryland. This bill, as you've heard, can help address that challenge. It's become my personal mission and passion since I became the CEO of the Tech Council to help address this problem for our businesses. To that end, one of the programs that we've developed at the Tech Council is the Venture Mentoring Service. And I bring it up because I think it's a great example of what this bill is capable of accomplishing. The Venture Mentoring Service is a program built on a platform that we licensed from MIT. To date, we've trained 160 executive mentors. We have supported 57 companies, ventures that have been a part and continue to be a part of the Venture Mentoring Service. Those companies have raised in excess of $100 million. Our administrative cost for this program is just over $100,000 per year. So for a nominal investment, we can help these companies generate significant investment in their businesses and in the state of Maryland. So with that, and for that reason, I urge you to support this bill with the amendment that reflects the emphasis on capital markets. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions of these speakers? Delegate Patterson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question as it relates to assistance or collaborations with young students or high schoolers as it relates to providing information or partnerships. And even as it relates to the Women Roundtable Network, I'm concerned, or I hope that people or women who have been more or less disenfranchised or left out would be one of the targeted audiences that assistance would be provided.
Thank you, Delegate Patterson. Mr. Troy Stauber, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I really do appreciate the question. And I'll try to be brief because I will tell you, Delegate Patterson, as Delegate Chi and some of the others here know, this is a personal passion area of mine. And I talk a lot, Delegate Patterson, about the need for TechCo to be very focused on wealth inclusion and wealth expansion. And that's thinking much more broadly about what we do. So absolutely, these are going to be areas you're going to hear us announce in a few months. We're going to be launching, we have this thing called the Rural Business Innovation Initiative, where we have individuals spread across the state in our rural areas. Well, ma'am, we're going to announce an urban business innovation pilot where we're going to have folks in Baltimore, initially in Prince George's County, that's going to be doing that same thing, sourcing, supporting, and growing our urban entrepreneurs and supporting our urban entrepreneurs and those two. So we're going to start off there, and we'll grow it over time. Through some other efforts here in the legislature as well, we're looking at trying to increase some funding for our Builder Fund, which is also focused on, again, social and economically disadvantaged individual groups. And then lastly, I actually have a draft of a document that I'm working with General Linda Singh, who was the previous interim here. And she's helping us lead an effort around women entrepreneurs leadership. And so we'll be announcing that over the next few months as well. So absolutely, ma'am, we understand the need to focus not just at the entrepreneurial level, but what I also talk about, ma'am, is those first couple of hires, so that we're making sure that not only the founders, a diversity of the founders, but also diversity of those individuals, those early stage companies hire those employees 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Mrs. Stovall, I appreciate that. I represent Southern Maryland, Charles County, and so I'm well aware of the need for people in rural or urban and suburban communities to have this kind of support. I would appreciate speaking with you offline, because I think there's several groups, organizations that could be part of the discussion group included in your network. Thank you very much.
I look forward to that conversation, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, that concludes the public hearing on House Bill 987. Let's go to our next SHE bill, which is House Bill 995. Delegate Shi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me go to HB 995, which is the sales and use tax restaurant utilities exemption. HB 995 will help one of the hardest hit industries during the pandemic, which are the restaurant and food service industries, by exempting their sales tax for the energy they use to prepare and serve food. With this bill, we are simply seeking to restore energy tax exemption for the restaurants. Before 1992, restaurant use of energy for food production and resale were exempt from sales tax. Unfortunately, the General Assembly repealed this tax exemption through a budget reconciliation bill passed during a special session in 92. In the meantime, other manufacturing industries continue to benefit from such a sales tax exemption for energy used in their production activities, but food production was not included. For reference, a similar sales tax exemption for restaurants has been in place in the District of Columbia since 2013. Virginia and 4 other states also have such exemptions. In this pandemic-ravaged economy, restaurants can use every bit of help they need. There is no better time to restore such exemption than now, as a direct and a more equitable way to help all restaurants. While the state is providing grants to restaurants through local county economic development organizations, the reality is most of them won't benefit because such programs are inevitably limited in scope, and many restaurant owners and operators are immigrants speaking English as a second language, for example, and unlikely to be even aware of such programs. With the current reality of long periods of shutdown, the eligible restaurants are likely going to be a smaller pool by the time this bill becomes law. But the message we send to our struggling restaurants and food service businesses, many of them are community staples for decades, will be so much appreciated. Restaurants are more than places to eat. They create memories, a sense of place, and a sense of community. It is important that we do everything we can to help and to save them. And it's with a very modest investment, I think the return on investment will be tremendous. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions, Delegate Patterson? You still have your hand up. Okay. All right, let's go to the witness list. Okay, our first speaker we'll have up is Melvin Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair, committee members. I'm Melvin Thompson. I represent the Restaurant Association of Maryland, and I want to thank the sponsor for bringing this bill forward. We certainly do appreciate it. And I also want to thank the committee for the hard work that you did on the Relief Act. That was a big help to us. And now we're really seeking some additional help more in the long term. And that's why we are supporting this legislation to restore the sales tax exemption on our industry's purchase of energy that we use to produce and serve the food that we sell. Delegate Chi is absolutely right. We did have this exemption prior to 1992, and so we're just looking to restore that. The restaurant industry's 4 to 6% average profit margin during normal times is lower than many of the other industries that continue to benefit from the same energy sales tax exemption that we lost. Restaurants tend to use more energy per square foot than many other commercial buildings. We use energy for refrigeration, cooking, and safe holding and handling and serving of the food that we produce for sale under strict regulatory and sanitation controls. And as you know, the restaurant and food service industry continues to struggle to recover from the COVID pandemic and the devastating business losses that we have suffered. We respectfully request that you consider restoring the energy sales tax exemption for restaurants and other defined food service establishments like caterers who have also suffered during this pandemic to assist our industry on this long road to recovery. And for these reasons, we would request a favorable report. And I've asked 2 restaurant operators to join me here today to provide additional comments, and I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker we'll have is Jeff Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm Jeff Owens with the Clyde's Restaurant Group. Does anyone remember, finding a spot in a big busy bar and, a group of your friends and coworkers and maybe flagging down the bartender to order some fried calamari or a margarita? It just seems like it's been forever, but that's what we're really yearning for. Clyde's operates 12 big dining saloons and a couple of live music venues in the DMV region. We did close one of our Maryland restaurants and one Maryland music venue in 2020 due to the COVID pandemic. We still have 2 very large restaurants in Maryland. And, just a little recap, our sales are down 60%. We, at the beginning of 2020, we had almost 2,000 employees company-wide. And that quickly went to 180 employees. And we really spent most of the year building the carry-out and delivery business and, really kind of pivoting and reinventing ourselves. We built up to over 1,000 employees in the fall, and then in December and January, we're down under 700 employees currently, just as a result of additional restrictions and the winter weather and so on. So that's kind of the the roller coaster that we've been on over the last year. But it's certainly a year to find ways to support restaurants and all the jobs that go along with restaurants. And I'll tell you, pretty much all full service restaurants that you can think of, if they're not closed down, they're actually scrambling to find sources of new capital, whether it's new borrowings, this is just to pay bills, new borrowings or liquidating savings of, the owner's savings, renegotiating contracts, grant programs, just any source of capital to continue on is what's happening in full service restaurants right now. This bill certainly doesn't save restaurants by itself. It's a part of really much needed relief. I think every little bit helps. And if this is something that can restore, that a restaurant can actually save a couple $1,000s, a year, with this manufacturing exemption, it's certainly something that would be appropriate and well-timed to put into place now. You know, manufacturing is long established as a tax-exempt activity, and restaurants, you know, I mean, you think about the manufacturing aspect of a restaurant, you know, and the energy that goes into that. You know, a restaurant takes $5 worth of groceries and applies some prep work to that and fires up the equipment with electricity and flames and fire and converts it into a $20 plate or box of food. I mean, and that's, you know, that's really the
Mr. Owens,
Yes.
your time has expired. Can you give us your summarizing sentence, please?
Oh, I apologize. Yes, I urge you to restore this credit, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Chris Hannon. Okay, there you go. Chris, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Chris Hannon. I'm an owner in the Waterfront and the Red Star restaurants in Fells Point, Baltimore City. I'm also an owner in Bo Brooks Crab House, the oldest crab house in Baltimore, again in Baltimore City. And lastly, I'm an owner in McGarvey's, which is right down the street in Annapolis. So House Bill 995 provides great targeted relief. And the reason I say that is that if we read the fiscal note, the estimated cost is between $1 million and $2 million. But as the note strikingly points out, that depends on how many restaurants there are, and even more, sadly, how many are still in business. So with that being said, I'll provide some of our numbers. McGarvey sales are down 40%. Waterfront, 57%. Bo Brooks are down 70%. Red Stars are down 90%. And our catering operation is down 100%. We haven't had a client since February of 2020. So to put in perspective how much this bill means to us, again, it's a small step, but on average, it would provide about $2,000 per year in tax relief, which is seemingly not a lot. It's certainly not a lot within the $1 to $2 million price tag. But to put in perspective, as Melvin said before, if you assume our profit margins are 5%, of $2,000 yearly savings is about $40,000 in sales. And I don't know any restaurant that couldn't use $40,000 in sales. So it's just a different way of looking at this. It's just, oh, this is $2,000. If you gave us, and that's more than a week's sales in every single place at this point, sadly. So more than, if you gave us a week's sales, we would take it in a heartbeat. Lastly, this is a long-term bill. So some of the things are dedicated towards the short term. But as Mr. Owens already pointed out, I don't know the next time anyone's going to be down at McGarvey's 3 deep at the bar trying to get a drink from Beans. And most importantly, with 6 foot distancing, no more than 6 people at a table, and no standing, we're not going to come out of this pandemic as quickly as I think as we will from a health standpoint. The restaurants, until we can get back to 100%, are going to be digging themselves out of a hole. One last number that may help you is that McGarvey's capacity is 288. Right now, we can only seat 65 people, and that doesn't matter if we're at 50%. That's only 25%. So we are never going above 25% at McGarvey's until the 6 foot social distancing is ended. So therefore, again, I ask you to support this bill because it'll provide manageable and targeted relief to the restaurant industry over the long term.
Yes. Okay. I think I have one more speaker, but I'm just going to ask Amy Woher, you on? Thanks. Okay. Delegate Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delegate Key, for this great bill. To either the restaurant owners or maybe to Mr. Thompson, I have 2 questions. Number one is, and if I missed it, I apologize. I was trying to take notes. At this point in time, what is your projection what is the knowledge of the number of restaurants we've lost permanently, and what is your projection of restaurants that we will lose if we don't take some of these measures and quickly?
And thank you very much for that question. That's a hard number to arrive at right now. We have a lot of restaurants that have decided to close during the months of January, February, and March, because those are the slowest periods for our industry. And then they'll reassess come spring and see whether it's worth opening again. We also don't have data from the Federal Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's where we usually get our numbers for the industry. And so what we've done just recently is ask for the comptroller's office to perhaps give us some data on the number of restaurants that have food service reporting codes for sales tax, in hopes that they can let us know how many of those have closed their sales and use tax accounts since March, because they would only close their accounts if they're out of business, and that might give us some indication until we can get additional data.
Okay, and could I just ask you, as you're gathering that data, it would be really interesting to know, if you don't already, what is the number of our restaurant workers who have had to go into unemployment? So if you have that data, or if you can get it to me at some point, it might be hard to parse that out, but I would imagine it's fairly high at this point.
And at the beginning of the pandemic, when there was the complete shutdown, there were as many as 150,000 restaurant workers that were laid off or furloughed. And most employers, as we just heard from the restaurant operators, have not fully rehired those employees.
Thank you for that. And then for the restaurant owners, thank you for hanging in there. And I do wish you the best. Once we are reopened at 100%, do either of you, with respect to your different businesses, and I know they're sort of spread out around the state, how many years do you think it will take you to really recoup and recover from what this past year has done to your businesses?
I'm going to estimate, for me, 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair estimate. It's, you know, we certainly hope there's some pent up demand that, you know, folks are going to really be anxious to get back into the social scene of, you know, dining and you know, socializing in restaurants. So.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? I want to thank the sponsor of the bill and the witnesses for being here. And we missed you all. We missed your restaurants. And I must say today, you guys made us hungry because we have
Thank you. It's almost dinner time. We appreciate it. And thanks again for your hard work on the Relief Act. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We have one bill to go. Delegate Chair.
Thank you. You're handing it back to me, I assume?
Yes, I think we're on our last bill, correct?
We sure are. House Bill 951. It's from a very smart, amazing, handsome delegate. And he's had to wait all day and deal with a tough day while I've been reading fun books with my baby.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Madam, for those compliments. I'm going to be quick because I know folks want to get to those restaurants and or get out to eat. But for the record, Delegate Alonzo Washington here to House Bill 951, which expands the existing military retirement income tax subtraction modification by increasing the maximum amount of retirement income that can be excluded to $20,000. In order to qualify for this modification, the resident must be at least 55 years old. The bill also expands the existing state subtraction modification for retired law enforcement, correctional officers, and fire and rescue and emergency services personnel by exempting up to $20,000 in retirement income for residents 55 years or older. This expansion is phased in over two tax years beginning in 2022. Expanding the subtraction modification will make Maryland a more desirable place to live for military retirees. It would also encourage retirees to remain in the state after the age of 55 as they begin to contemplate life after completely leaving the workforce. Currently, 21 states exempt military retirement pay from state income taxes, and 16, including Maryland, have partial exemptions. Expanding the tax income subtraction not only benefits Maryland retired veterans, and first responders, but it also benefits our state as a whole. For those reasons, Madam Chair asks respectfully for a report on House Bill 951. Well, for staying for my bill as the last bill.
Thank you, Delegate Washington, and thank you, Delegate Rose. You're so very correct. Any questions for Delegate Washington? All right, seeing none, I'll go to the first person signed up, Diana Bergman.
Good evening, Ways and Means Committee. I want to start off by saying thank you very much, Delegate Washington, for adding this much needed modification for our military retirees. I've stayed here patiently waiting, and what I've learned is we have corporations making millions of dollars of Marylanders, and they're not paying their fair share of taxes. They'll say that they'll leave, it's going to break their business, and then they're still here. So let's talk about people that are actually leaving Maryland. Let's talk about our veterans that retire in our military, and we've been letting them go away. They've moved to other nearby states, and even though they love Maryland, it's been tough because we've been taxing them a bit too high. So I'm in favor for something like this because we shouldn't be turning away people that have top secret security clearance, people that have skills that could provide a lot of benefits for Maryland to grow for our military members. They go through intense training throughout their career, and they provide a very diverse outlook of service and time, making sacrifices for our country. So we should be treating them a lot better. You know, I really think sometimes we tax the wrong people here in Maryland. And we should have, we should be able to take care of people in Maryland and keep people in Maryland, bright, very smart, educated people with tremendous skills and leadership skills. So I'm asking the Ways and Means Committee to be very supportive of this. This is very important. It might not apply to my husband when he retires. He gets to retire at the age of 50, 43. But even with that, you tax our military families too high when they're veterans and they retire here in the state. And if we don't change that as a whole, you're going to lose some really great people that really love Maryland, because I love Maryland. This is the only state and region that we get all 4 seasons, and I absolutely love it. And thank you very much. And again, I really appreciate this bill, and we got to be more considerate of what we're doing with our veterans. So we should be more supportive to our military families and our veterans that retire in the state of Maryland. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bergman. Is Mr. Gabal here?
Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Chair Kaiser, distinguished members of the House Ways and Means Committee, and I'm glad to be back with you again. I'm Patrick Gabal, Legislative Director for the Maryland Military Coalition, and we join you today on behalf of House Bill 951. You've been provided a copy of my written testimony, so in the interest of the late hour, just let me summarize. House Bill 951 will greatly aid military and public safety employees by increasing their spending capital. We believe the tax subtraction modification outlined in HB 951 will generate greater spending capital, which in turn will enhance sales tax revenue. Maryland Military Coalition, serving 17 active duty and veteran service organizations whose clients and members number nearly 150,000 Maryland residents, believe HB 951 is a win-win for all concerned. We respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 951. And in closing, we wish to thank Delegate and Ways and Means Co-Chair Alonzo Washington for his compassion to the retiree community, especially veterans and first responders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gabal. We next have Melvin Graves.
Good evening, Madam Chair, and delegate members. My name is Melvin Graves. I am the Vice Chair of American Legion at Department of State of Maryland Legislative Commission. We join you today to support House Bill House Bill 951. Delegate Washington couldn't have said it better. This increase from 15 to 20,000 will aid our veterans and first responders. I mean, keep them here, keep them home, do this for them, and they will definitely stay here in Maryland where Marylanders want to stay. The American Legion believes that during this tragic times in this pandemic, we humbly ask a favorable report on this Bill 951. And also want to thank Delegate Washington for his foresight and commitment in supporting this bill and bringing this bill forward. We veterans truly appreciate this effort that you're putting into this bill, Vice Chair, and we look forward to a favorable vote on this. Let me close really with just this. This increase is the right thing to do for the right cause for those who have served. This is the right thing to do. Again, we ask for a favorable vote on House Bill 951. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We next have Jeff Buttle.
Good evening, Madam Chair. It's always good to see you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, for sponsoring this bill. Jeff Buttle, President of the Professional Firefighters of Maryland. We represent over 10,000 active and retired firefighters across the state of Maryland. I testified last week on a bill that was on the same subject matter. So given the late hour, I'm not going to repeat my testimony to the committee. By way of history, last year, this exact piece of legislation actually came over to Ways and Means from the Senate. It came over before crossover timely, and unfortunately, the pandemic hit. And I think it was just a few days after crossover that unfortunately the General Assembly had to adjourn. So we're hoping to pick up those conversations again with the committee. This year, it's early in session. Madam Chair, happy to work with the committee and any subcommittees that this may get assigned to continue our conversations from last year. So thank you very much. I will keep this short given the late hour so the committee can get out of here, but I request a fair report on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buttle. It is a late hour for Ways and Means, though. I think Judiciary went until 10 o'clock last night. We have one more person to testify, Ms. Lynn Nash.
Thank you very much. Again, good evening, Madam Chair and Vice Chairman and members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Lynn Nash. You've already heard from me once today, and you have my written testimony. Thank you, Delegate Washington, for introducing House Bill 951, which is an incremental improvement to the way that Maryland taxes uniformed services retired pay. I'm a retired captain, having served 30 years in both the Army and the United States Public Health Service. I'm also a PhD prepared nurse who served as a member of the National Security Council's pandemic planning team. So I have a valuable skill set very much needed today and a valid recent background check for my security clearance. So I'm kind of a good candidate. However, I have not sought employment because I'm in a top tax bracket and I already pay a lot of taxes. Working would mean that I would essentially gain nothing, as almost everything that I would make would be taken in taxes. I'm here today to testify in support of Delegate Washington's bill, which expands the existing military retirement income tax subtraction from $15,000 to $20,000 phased in over 2 years. As of January 1, 2020, I'm sorry, Delegate Washington, my statistics show that 31 states do now tax military retired pay at all. Please look at the fact sheet that I submitted, which was developed by the Maryland Council of Chapters. Remember that Maryland is 19th in the number of veterans who live here, but 31st in the best states for veterans state rankings in a 2020 study by Smart Asset. Primarily, this is because of retired pay. And you know that many veterans choose to commute into jobs in Maryland from nearby states that don't tax military retirement rather than live here. Our state is denying itself income from second career, extremely marketable retirees like me with skills and security clearances coveted by the defense, intelligence, and cybersecurity sectors of the state economy, which now have many vacancies. Maryland can become much more competitive in this arena by enacting House Bill 951. As a life member of the Commissioned Officers Association of the United States Public Health Service, which has over 1,200 members that live in Maryland, as a life member of the Military Officers Association of America, and as the legislative director of the Maryland Council of Chapters, and as the communications director for the Maryland Military Coalition, thanks, Pat, which represent 17 veteran-oriented organizations with over 150,000 military connected people in our state. We support this bill, and I support this bill as well as its companion bill, Senate Bill 370. I appreciate your interest in supporting uniformed services, especially retirees, and I ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nash. Any questions for any of the 5 people who just spoke? Seeing no questions, we're done with the hearing on House Bill 950. Sorry, I blame my wife for this.
Members of the committee, thank you, everybody. That concludes the hearing for today. I'm not sure if she said that, but are there any announcements? I know we have a meeting tomorrow to vote, and thank you all. Thank you, witnesses, for being here as well. I know it's been a long day for all of us, but any announcements, Marcel?
No other than you did a good job today, Alonzo.
Thanks, Delegate Barnes. Always on time, man. Even when we don't need you, you're always on time. All right, saying none, thank you all for a great day today, and we'll see you tomorrow.
All right, thanks, guys.
Have fun in the